All right, we will call to order a meeting of the Private Forest Board Mitigation Advisory Committee. March 12th. To begin, we will start with a roll call. Andy, can you lead us through a roll call?
Yes, I will call your name. Please respond in the affirmative if you're present. Chad Washington.
Here.
Scott Lightcap.
Here.
Courtney Dreisel.
Here.
Fran Caparata.
Here.
Andrew Perky.
Here.
Mark Stern. Here. Mark Rembrandt.
Here.
Jennifer Weichel.
Here.
Kate Wells.
Hi, Andy, this is Sam Bankston with Noah. I'm sitting in on Kate's behalf.
Thank you. Chris Allen. Sarah Gregory. All right. Ready to proceed with that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andy. Next, we will approve the agenda for this meeting. So hearing, is anybody opposed to approving the agenda? Any comment? Okay, consider that approved. Next item, we have the consent agenda, which consists of the meeting minutes from our February 25 meeting. Has everyone received the minutes? Had an opportunity to review? A lot of heads nodding. Any additions? Any edits? Okay. We will approve the agenda. Stady, do we have any public comment submitted?
I didn't have anything previously submitted for public comment, but this is an opportunity for anyone online. If you'd like to submit public comment, please raise your hand virtually or come off of mute.
Is there a way that we could see anyone online on the screen here?
Yes.
No public comment here. I don't think we need to worry about it.
Yeah. I'm just.
Oh my gosh, how hard is that?
We don't have any public comment. We can proceed to.
All right, thank you, Andy. I guess, given that there is no public comment, I'm going to take what we to say we should introduce ourselves around the room. We have some new committee members that may not have met our PFA stream bios yet. So with that, would you like to start and we'll work around the room this way?
And education with the
Good.
Nicole Well with the Private Forest Accord Grant Specialist.
Jessica Watson, I'm the acting habitat administrator. All in the community.
Jeremy Webster, I'm the Private Forest Accord stream biologist for Region 5 down in Klamath Falls.
I am here, Perky. I'm a committee member. Scott Lightcap, committee member.
Courtney Dreisel.
Got Washington, committee member.
Mark Stern.
Jennifer Weichel, yeah, it's
Maybe, whatever.
yeah.
Fran Caparata, committee member.
Mark Rembrandt, Urban Watershed Enhancement Board, ex officio committee.
AJ Van Dublin, Private Forest Accord stream bio for Southwest Oregon, based out of Roseburg. Kevin Gray, Private Forest Accord stream biologist for Region 2, based out of Newport. Paul Olmsted, I'm the PFA stream bio analyst for West Cascades.
Lucy Anderson, PFA stream bio for Region 1, based out of Tillamook.
Kirsten Russell, Private Forest Accord stream biologist, the other part of Region 5 on the northern half of Eastern Oregon, Admiral Grant.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us. I know some of you had some pretty long travel, so good to have you here. Next, we'll move into the staff report. Andy.
Yes. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Andy Skirk. I'm the Private Forest Accord Grant Coordinator. Today, the committee is meeting to review and recommend Private Forest Accord grant projects for funding, all of which were submitted in the 2024 open solicitation in fall of last year. I'd like to do a few important reminders before we get started. All meeting materials discussed today, including the preliminary project packet, are posted at pfagrants.com for anyone online who wants to download it. Just a reminder, that preliminary project packet is not the final decision. The committee has full authority to move projects up or down, above or below that funding line, depending on their evaluation of each project and its merit. For any applicants watching today, please note that we are not accepting any comments or revisions to project applications at this time. Once submitted, all project applications are considered final and complete. Today's focus, to be clear, this meeting is informational. The committee will have the chance to ask questions to the regional PFA stream biologist about specific project details, but the final deliberations will be taking place tomorrow at our public meeting also. This is a first day of a 2-day meeting. During today's regional presentations, we will only present on critical and high priority ranked projects due to the large volume of submissions that this program received. It's important to note that these priority rankings reflect how well each project aligns with the Private Forest Accord Grant Program's goals and objectives, as well as the priorities of the department. Lower priority ranking does not mean a project has less value. It simply means it may not fully meet the program's goals. As you can see, here's the agenda for today. A more detailed agenda is available online at pfagrants.com. Before I conclude the staff update, I just want to do a real quick review of the solicitation. So as you can see on the map here, which shows the 5 different review regions used by this grant program throughout Oregon, we received an astounding request for project funds from around the state this past year. We had over 63 project submissions, totaling over $34 million in requested funding. We saw an increase in submitted projects from East Region, as well as an overall slightly larger average funding request when compared to last year. Majority of these projects are implementation based, with over $15 million being requested for that project type alone. I'd like to briefly discuss the review process before we get into presentations today or any other questions the committee may have. Each project submitted is reviewed within its respective regional boundary based on several factors. The reviews consider merits such as clarity, technical soundness, watershed context, the capacity of applying organization, and alignment with the Private Forest Accord Grant Program's priorities and goals. Once the regional reviews are completed, including all comments and feedback led by our PFA stream biologists on the other side of this room, they are provided to the advisory committee members for their final consideration during the review period. Each review region consists of at least 4 different reviewing agencies and partners. The partners, led by ODFW PFA stream biologists, include U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, NOAA or NIMF, and Oregon Department of Forestry. Before we move on, I want to express my gratitude for our partners across the state. They spent the winter conducting these extensive reviews, and their expertise and insights are crucial to this process. This helps us ensure that the projects meet the goal of the Private Forest Accord Grant Program and how they may also support the broader objectives of our partners statewide. So we very much appreciate the time and effort. Well over dozens and dozens of reviewers involved in this process to get to this point. So thank you very much. With that, that's kind of all I wanted to do for a staff report and some house cleaning. I'll hand it back to you, Chad, if there's any questions before you get into the regional presentation that you have.
Any questions from committee members? I get people ready for the review region presentations.
All right, I'm going to get Kelsey's Anderson's presentation ready. Just a quick second.
Yes.
Yeah, and in a pause, I just wanted to thank all the ODFW staff for all the review and the work that you involved in and putting Andy, Tiffany, and everybody else. A lot of effort goes into making all this happen. So, thank you.
It was up briefly.
Sorry, yeah, let me just bring it back over here. Got to share it with the public here, though.
Looks good on our end.
So on your guys, but the public can't see it, this, Sam. Just a second. Go. It's not sharing with that.
It's up here, I think.
Right there. Thanks for the patience. We're there.
Like you're probably sharing now.
Correct. Getting. Patience, guys, here we go. Not a break. Fine.
Well, thank you everyone, for being here today. Again, I'm Kelsey Anderson, so I'm presenting for Region 1. For some context, so Region 1 is highlighted here in kind of that light pink color. So it goes from the ocean over to the Willamette, and from the Columbia River down to about Otis, following Highway 18 to 22. For total requested funds for Region 1, that was $3,835,000. That is 11% of the total requested funds, and on average, the funding ask was $455. There were 8 proposals submitted. 5 of those were implementation, 2 were implementation and planning, and 1 was planning. For ODFW priority ranking, 2 of those were critical, 3 high, and 3 were at medium or low. 4 out of the 6 counties within this region were represented within applications. That includes Plaza, Tillamook, Columbia, and Washington County. However, my 2 southern counties, Polk and Yamhill, are shared with Region 2. So there may have been applications within those counties, but they didn't go to Region 2 for review based off where they kind of fall in that county line. For some more background within this region, so for HCP species within this region, that includes native salmon and cutthroat trout, as well as the green sturgeon. For amphibians, Columbia torrent salamanders, coastal giant salamanders, coast giant salamanders, and the coastal tailed frog can be found within this region. Coho streams should receive priority funding, and some of the limiting factors are loss of rearing habitat and lack of stream complexity. Some common issues within this region are degraded water quality and habitat, fish passage, loss of cold water refugia and cut-off sloughs and wetlands. Natural recruitment of large wood is also an issue within this region, and some of the loss of rearing and off-channel habitat is due to agricultural land or diking. Some recommended conservation actions are maintaining and enhancing in-channel watershed function and connection to riparian habitat, flow, and hydrology. So next I'll kind of get into the critical and high ranked projects. So the first one I'll talk about is the Coffee Creek Aquatic Organism Passage Project. This applicant was the Tualatin River Watershed Council. It was a project type of implementation. The funding ask was $200,000 with a slew of HCP listed species, as well as the listed upper Willamette steelhead and Pacific lamprey. This project is a fish passage project for 4.1 miles of stream by replacing a double barrel culvert to a bridge, as well as creating rough and chute. The solution of a rough and chute and bridge are logical solutions to the problem in order to restore fish passage as well as fluvial transport. Some of the benefits of this project is to restore access to spawning grounds, winter refugia, summer rearing areas, and thermal refuge from the temperature-limited main stem of Gales Creek. This area was identified as priority anchor habitat for steelhead, and the barrier was identified as a significant obstruction within multiple assessments. Pacific lamprey have been detected near the confluence of this creek, and the current culverts are a full barrier to Pacific lamprey, so a bridge would provide passage for lamprey. This project also has connectivity to a 2024 large wood placement project, which is upstream, as well as an upstream potentially large forested wetland, which could provide significant off-channel wintertime rearing opportunities. The scale of impact to the covered species is favorable for this overall budget. One of the concerns for this application was some of the implementation of the project within the stated budget was unknown. For example, the bank protection element was not given in the budget, so it's unknown where that will be covered. But the ODFW priority ranking for this application was critical. Next, we have the Tuffy Creek Fish Passage, Building Resilience in a Changing Climate. This applicant was the Tillamook Estuaries Partnership, and this is a planning and implementation project with a funding ask of $783 and $800. HCP listed species are native salmon and trout, as well as the coastal and coast giant salamander and coastal tailed frog. Mountain whitefish was listed as a or checked as a species within this application area. However, those fish are not found in this area, so it was probably selected by accident in filling out the application. For listed species, this includes the Oregon Coast coho salmon. So this project is to upgrade a fish ladder at a diversion dam in order to meet state fish passage criteria. So the benefit is it's going to open up over 12 miles of high quality big water habitat. This would gain access to approximately 6.4 miles of coho salmon, Pacific lamprey, and steelhead habitat, with 4.4 of those being for Chinook as well. Also an additional 6 miles of cutthroat habitat. So again, that's a total of 12.4 miles of suitable spawning habitat, rearing habitat, and refugia for anadromous and resident fish species. The PFA grant funding within this application would be used to improve the project capacity in order to meet this required non-federal match to access a secured Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart grant that's already been awarded to this project. The modernized fish screen that would be included within these designs would be safe for fish, so meeting the state and federal requirements and also reducing entrainment for overall fish population health and growth. ODFW surveys have also confirmed that the Tuffy Dam is a complete barrier for lamprey within this project, and so it would directly align with the guidance design for Pacific lamprey passage. And lamprey have been observed downstream of the dam, so they are present within the system. Upstream of this project is ODF State Forest Timberland, and ODF is already in current talks with ODFW on potential future wood projects. So that would improve upstream habitat once this barrier is addressed. Some of the concerns is this application was lacking some details on why funds are needed to support hatchery operations. So this project isn't needed for hatchery fish, it's needed for wild fish. The Ruffin Channel is not a part of this because operations still need to be maintained within this fish ladder. So there's no intention of releasing hatchery fish upstream, so having a ladder is necessary. But upstream habitat, once open, would serve as a wild rearing fish sanctuary. The dam also supplies water to a hatchery rearing pond, and so again, having a fish ladder and trap ensures that those released hatchery fish are separated from wild spawning fish from the habitat upstream of the dam, and reducing hatchery and wild fish interactions directly aligns with ODFW's conservation plans. And so this project was also rated as critical. Next, we have the Salmonberry Confluence Cold Water Refugia Habitat Enhancement application. This applicant was the Lower Nehalem Watershed Council. Project type of implementation was a funding ask of $685,000. HCP listed species are the native salmon and trout, including the Oregon Coast coho salmon. This project is to install 18 large wood structures at the Salmonberry Cold Water Confluence site. The primary goal of this project is to provide cover and habitat complexity for juvenile salmonids during summertime low flow periods when those water temperatures are at their peak. In addition, large wood placement within these areas will also increase streambed complexity and heterogeneity, retaining streambed gravels and increasing connectivity to floodplain and side channel features, as well as improve fish access into tributaries. So addressing a limiting factor within the Oregon Coast coho recovery plan. This is also a priority project of the Nehalem Basin Partnership and is listed within the Nehalem Strategic Action Plan for coho. This project is really exciting because it could show proof of concept and provide a template to improve habitat complexity at additional cold water confluences within the Nehalem River watershed, which are devoid of large wood and complex pool habitat. This would be showing that structures like designed in this project have longevity within high energy systems that don't contain large floodplains and could provide a blueprint for streams where that temperature data has a larger difference. This would vastly improve riparian habitat within this watershed. This need will only continue to grow as water temperatures warm due to climate change impacts, and the Nehalem River can reach lethal temperatures for salmonids within that summertime period. Research into similar projects in Washington state have resulted in stabilized large wood structures getting either buried by sediment or rock, retaining in place, or in some cases, moving a bit downstream, but as a large dram. And so individual wood wasn't breaking off and the colors weren't breaking. Project costs are high to install 18 large wood structures compared to other large wood projects, but that's due to the addition of artificial fasteners as well as the location of the project and the amount of designing that goes into a project like this. Collared and engineered log jams have a low likelihood of failing, and sometimes the risk of large wood movement is such that rock collaring is warranted. To accomplish all these important goals, there is some willingness to accept that this project is accept with uncertainties and maybe no guarantee of success. One of the concerns is some of the matching funds are currently unsecured, and so ODFW priority ranking is as high. Next is the McPherson Creek Passage project. This is also with the Lower Nehalem Watershed Council with a project type of implementation and a cost of $388,000. Again, native salmon and trout with Oregon Coast coho salmon. This is to replace an undersized culvert and install a bridge to provide access to 0.65 miles of habitat. This will provide access to spawning and rearing habitat, as well as allow for more natural transport of sediment and large wood. The cold waters of McPherson Creek are particularly important as the Nehalem River, again, can reach lethal temperatures for salmonids within the summer. Temperature data was included, and it created a strong argument as it showed that McPherson Creek can be at 12.9 degrees Celsius, while the main stem Nehalem is at 21.7 degrees. A fish passage upgrade will reduce the chance of the future crossing failure, which is likely in its current state. That would negatively impact fish passage as well as recreational and forest management activities within this area. 1 year during some rapid bioassessment surveys, it showed that this culvert was purged 6 feet. And another year, the culvert was not purged due to significant gravel accumulation. And so replacing the culvert with a bridge would allow for transport of sediment and debris, allowing McPherson to remain connected regardless of upstream inputs that have caused significant variability in passage reported over the last 10 years. One of the concerns, or some of the concerns for this project, is the timeline seems a little out of phase with this PFA grant process, as the proposed start date was much earlier than recommended. Some of the final designs and permitting was still pending upon the application being submitted. So there is a chance that the project maybe doesn't come together this summer. However, if it is funded now, it will be less expensive and less disruptive, as it's a critical mainline road and the timing lines up with mainline or with hauling needs. ODFW's priority ranking was high. Conyers Creek Habitat Diversification and Enhancement Project. So the applicant was the Columbia Soil and Water Conservation District with a project type of planning and implementation. The funding ask was $572,000 with native salmon and trout. This includes the Lower Columbia River coho, Lower Columbia River steelhead, a distinct population segment, the Lower Columbia River chinook, and Columbia River chum. This project will restore aquatic organism passage, floodplain riparian habitat, and wetland habitats. For the benefits of this project, historic and current data has indicated that Conyers was once more of a braided complex of channels with a relatively wide and accessible floodplain. Currently, the stream is incised and lacks large wood and is dominated by invasive weeds. And so this project is to restore aquatic organism passage to 0.01 miles of stream by reopening a historic stream channel, as well as restoring 0.43 miles of floodplain riparian habitat and 3.85 acres of wetland habitat by placing 120 large wood pieces, installing 9 beaver dam analogs, removing drain tiles, installing livestock exclusion fencing, and planting riparian and wetland species for beaver forage. This project is focusing on habitat restoration for multiple species in a region strategically vital for recovery and reintroduction efforts. The scope and scale of the proposed project could be worth the investment, as it's a major floodplain restoration project with benefits to many fish species, including 2 that are either on a reintroduction, an existing reintroduction project like the Chum, and a future reintroduction project like Chinook. Again, it's a large-scale floodplain restoration project in the lower watershed of the Clastonite Basin, which is a priority basin for fish recovery under the Lower Columbia River Conservation and Recovery Plan. And these restoration actions are likely to succeed and provide a net benefit to native salmonids, and also could provide a template to expand similar efforts to other properties within this watershed. One of the concerns was the timeline for implementation, monitoring, and reporting extended up to 5 years, so it could introduce some uncertainty regarding budget stability, and the ODFW priority ranking was high. I'll briefly touch on the medium and low range projects within this region. First, we have the Lower Davis Creek Fish Passage and Wetland Restoration Project. The funding ask was $165,000. This was a planning project with Trout Unlimited. This would be designs to replace an undersized perch culvert and entirely remove another culvert 300 feet upstream of that replacement one, which would restore access to approximately 1.5 miles of potential spawning and rearing cold water habitat, as well as wetland restoration. Surveys upstream of the project site are needed to determine adult fish usage. Upon a site visit, there were no spawning gravels found within the project area, so the stream could be a little bit more geared towards rearing. And although multiple species of native salmonids could benefit from this project, salmonid use in abundance within Davis Creek and the limiting factors affecting that use is not well described. As such, the overall benefits of the project for native salmonids wasn't well known. Rainforest Reserve ecolable forest habitat restoration. This funding ask was $100,000 for implementation with the North Coast Land Conservancy. This project would restore forest and riparian habitat within the Ecola Bowl area of the Rainforest Reserve within areas that are starting to develop mature forest conditions. As well, it would build on previous variable density thinning that's already been conducted by the North Coast Land Conservancy and is expected to improve forest condition and health. The application did lack detail or specific examples on how the proposed work would create the desired forest condition or success rates of the proposed actions. There's also a lack of detail on how the proposed actions address limiting factors for the HCP listed species. And finally, we have the Patterson Creek Phase 2 construction project with a funding ask of $940,000. This is an implementation project with the city of Bay City. So it funded the culvert on 7th Street, which has not met fish passage criteria for 8 years, will finally be addressed. And the culvert on 8th Street will be removed, which both are important actions that to this point have stalled implementing fish passage improvements within this watershed. This project is a part of a larger comprehensive plan to address fish passage throughout the entire Patterson Creek watershed. The project application repeatedly describes the Patterson Creek project as a whole, rather than focusing on the specific portion or phase of this project that's proposed for funding under this grant cycle. So it did make it difficult to discern what would be accomplished under the specific phase of this project. Significant additional funds will still need to be acquired by the city to complete the final 3 passage projects. This includes the fish ladder, which is upstream of this proposed work, And that fish ladder is thought at this time, in its current condition, to be a total barrier. This application does have a high cost, and if there's potential that a large portion of the funds are going towards infrastructure improvements, such as improving streets and a sewer line reconstruction. With that, that was all the projects within Region 1, and so at this time I can take any questions if I have time.
Yeah, that's great, Kelsey, thank you. Great presentation. I'll start with a question I believe it was Pearson mentioned that it was on a main line. Who owns that main line?
I believe it's ODM.
So it is state land? So it would not be subject to the forest code inventory and assessment requirements for removal and replacement of that crossing.
Yeah.
So it would actually still be uplift and additional, right? Any other questions from committee members?
I just had a general question, sort of for you, Kelsey, but really for everybody. I just wonder how much you guys talked about what does critical mean versus high, or how did you make those assignments? Because a couple regions had no critical projects and others had more. I just wondered how much.
Yeah.
For my area, I guess, the folks who, kind of helped put together the review on behalf of ODFW for this region, we were mostly looking at kind of restoration thing versus, like which ones seemed like really good projects that were gonna help, kind of move that needle. Part of it also is looking at the ability of the application too, and what were some of the other things we looked at?
Yeah, some of them were based on what was defined within, like what Andy had within our reviews in terms of like critical, the way it was defined as the proposal ranks highly on all review areas, thus promises a high likelihood of significant benefits to covered species. High, the proposal ranks highly in almost all review areas and concerns are minor and likely to be easily to address. Medium, proposal ranks high in some areas, but only moderately or poor in others. Low, proposal ranks poorly in one or more areas and concerns are sufficient. Suggest concern about the potential success of the proposal. So those were kind of like how it was broken, like how it was described to us to be thinking about it. But I think we also like, at least I can speak for myself, for my region, thinking about like what types of projects have availability for funding outside the PFA, as well as like what's important in our region, in terms of like helping to decide, like kind of getting in between some of those different levels. Something that kind of came into account for mine, as well as like, I think all of us requested other people within our agency to look at all of the proposals that we were given, whether it be district fish bios or regional specialists or things like that. And so we are incorporating those reviews into the one review that you guys read from ODFW, which is what we're presenting on behalf of like the larger group of reviewers. So I know I'll just add those couple of comments for mine as well, and then obviously everyone else can add more thoughts too.
Yeah, I think location and listed species is a huge driver too. So we have a cut road only street versus one that has CSA listed as someone, I think, with a huge driver. So, yeah, and then just within that, you know, the descriptions you gave is so much I mean, we want to the reviewer. And for me, you know, it's that listed species, really good habitat location, ranks them the highest, and kind of that critical level that that's laying out. It doesn't look like there's any hangups. The project's ready to go, likely to succeed. Start breaking it down from there. Start dropping off critical species. And else, start moving it out.
Kirsten, you mentioned the possibility of funding from other sources as being one thing you considered. Kelsey, you mentioned one of the projects had a water smart grant pending. How much as a group do we want to consider, given the uncertainty about other streams of funding, specifically funding cost share that was listed, that was a federal funding source? And then more broadly, would your opinion perhaps change about the fundability of this project elsewhere given the current situation?
So yeah, if I could clarify what I meant there, for me, and I'll touch on this when we get at the end of the day to Region 5 review, but one thing that's really been apparent in our region is a lot of the restoration work that is done, a lot of it is BPA funded, or there's a lot of OWEB grants as well, but a lot of the funding sources where people are going for really prioritize like that it needs to be like an anadromous habitat, especially like Chinook. Like if you don't have Chinook, maybe steelhead, like it's hard to get funding. And so looking at, whereas for the PFA grant, it's all native salmonids. And so that includes bull trout and red band trout. And so those types of projects feel like a really good fit within this grant that are then maybe looked not able to be funded through outside grants as well. So that's just kind of something where I don't know necessarily ranking it, like I'm not necessarily ranking it higher based on that, but just taking into account that like, even if it's just like, you know, red band trout as opposed to like a laundry list of HCP species, that like that's still a really great fit for this specific grant. And they may not be able to get as competitive, you know, money elsewhere from some of the other grant sources in our area.
That makes sense, particularly the Bonneville impact of your region. So again, Kirsten, what about, I mean, Kelsey, what about the update on the status of that? Sounds like you've been awarded, but not yet contracted.
So yeah, it's a secured one, and that's I believe that's going mostly towards the implementation. So this is looking at more of the designs of those projects, but it's a secured grant. I'm not sure what that's gonna mean.
Perhaps it's just way too uncertain, Chad, for us right now to be able to project what's going to happen with these federal funds. But I did take note that a number of these proposals had cost share from federal sources, and those are currently uncertain in terms of brought to bear.
Yeah, that's great. And I think as far as that uncertainty goes, it's uncertain whether it's positive or negative, and it would be unfair to lower the ranking based on that uncertainty. So if the committee agrees, I think we should go ahead and fund it as though it will receive the funding. If not, then those funds would come back.
And then you get to deal with it.
You mean, like we haven't decided on anything.
Right, but if we were to be looking at one that's receiving federal match,
Correct.
I don't think we should artificially penalize the fact that the match is coming from a federal source.
Totally agree.
Kelsey, one thing that caught my attention was your Salmonberry project. You mentioned something about tethering or collaring as a proof of concept. Can you elaborate? It wasn't in one of my project to review. So
the collaring and tethering itself isn't a proof of concept. It's mostly just a engineered large wood design like this proof of concept within the area that it's being proposed at. And so projects like that haven't really been done in Oregon before. And so they have been done in Washington. So it's shown that those have kind of lasted throughout large storms. But yeah, having that, this was kind of the first one that could happen within this watershed. And with the landowner agreeing to it, it could show, you know, if it holds and works, it could open the door for other projects like that happening within this watershed, which is devoid of wood.
again, not having reviewed it, have you been in conversation with regulatory agencies, because they're typically not big fans of like anchoring, cabling, tethering, that kind of thing. So
I haven't been in conversations like that, so I'm unsure. It does seem like for wood placement designs in this specific area, it's found that anchoring and cabling is going to be needed. And so I think part of it is as the wood kind of dissolved over time, ensuring that that's coming out. But this project has taken into account too, like a lot of the usage of that stream with water recreation, whether it's fishing or kayaking and things like that. So I think also trying to do it in a way where it doesn't necessarily like it's, you know, anchored to. Yeah.
thanks.
Great.
Couple of questions. Great presentation. Kelsey actually answered several questions during it, so.
Okay.
But I just had a couple. On the Conyers Creek project, is that section of stream listed for the water quality parameters?
That I'm unsure about, but I'm trying to look that up.
It's not, it was just more of a curiosity that your approach or the approach in the project looks like it's going to get the stream and it's just curious if it was designed around that. For Tuffy Creek, what's the current level of design?
I believe it's at 0. So it's mostly towards like the design end. OEFW has already come up with, some designs that they would like to see based off of other similar projects that have happened like this. And so they're answering.
So based on that, or is the budget, because it's kind of design build, what's your confidence level in the budget for the implementation?
I believe for that time being that they did, because they had other similar projects happening, they were able to kind of come up with what they thought.
So based on the project. Let's see, with Salmonberry, what did I hear you say that the summer water temperatures are currently on?
But so within the Nehalem River, those summer temperatures can get to a lethal temperature within the spring.
So this is more of a question, not so much about the project specifics, but is there any talk about maybe doing some monitoring around the degree of flow that could be created by the additional scour?
Yeah, I know that Watershed Council has been working, I think it's with the Potomac Estuaries Partnership. So they've been doing some like thermal drone flights and things like that. So that's public information, and then I'm potentially working that into a plan for this project within that scale. Sorry, real quick, going back to Tuffy Creek. So it does seem like those costs are a best estimate based on an engineering opinion.
Next question. In McPherson Creek, what's the grading above the culvert?
That I'm also unsure of.
Like you mentioned, it was spawning in, so it's good.
I do know when a site visit was done there by district staff, they were pleasantly surprised with the amount of it was above. I think it was like more than or it was better than they were originally thinking it was going to be.
That's always a good thing. Last question about is there much perch fill behind the culvert? We would expect to see a lot of down cuttings when it's there. Measures in place, or is it just not an issue?
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll take it into consideration. That's it. But thank you.
Thank you.
Sort of process question.
Yeah.
But just in looking at these projects in real time and then looking at the raw scores that were given by the reviewers, I just wanted to confirm the basis of how these were listed, because the one project I see is one that it's a couple points lower than the raw scores for a project that was like 2 or 3 down. Are these grouped in any way?
There's these four. So, and these four uses an average, your own reviewer average, so correct.
Yes.
There's the ones that were a little bit higher, but since like those two match, it's gonna put that higher.
Perfect. You told us about that before. I forgot.
Oh, no worries.
That's
Yeah.
great.
That's probably worth mentioning, Andy, if you want to elaborate
Yeah,
a little bit on Z-score and what it attempts to do.
Yes, I am just we do that real quick. Let me put my notes on it.
And in the meantime, while you're looking that up, Andy, I think it's important, the conversation around PFA, ODFW priority ranking as critical, high, or low does not necessarily mean that that is a project that is worth or not worth funding. And you will see some that are low ranking in our preliminary above the funding line, and that's okay. That is totally fine. There are reasons like a really high quality project with maybe some errors in the application that could result in a high or a low when the project itself may be critical to this uplift for that species and that location. So let's not get too hung up on that ODFW priority ranking. How well does this fit with what we're tasked with doing?
Ready? Yeah, well said, thanks. Yeah, so I'll read a little bit about the Z-scores. It's gonna sound very similar to what I gave Mark the other day, but it's a
And you gave us once before too.
same language. Oh, it's all right. Stuff changes too. And then I'll kind of just talk about the breakdown real quick of it. But kind of higher level Z-scores, somewhat level the playing field, ensuring that each review is fairly compared. Z-scores standardized reviews among the committee and ensures that individual ratings are fairly compared, regardless of differences in each of your individual ratings. So it accounts for rating and scoring bias. So the different committee members may have different scoring tendencies. Some may consistently rate stuff higher, while others consistently rate lower. A Z-score adjusts for those tendencies by centering that score around each reviewer's own average in the process. So it helps with variable scoring. Some reviewers may use a wide range of scores, while others cluster around the middle, standardizing with Z-scores and ensure that the ratings are measured on the same scale at the same time. So this is different than last year. Last year, as a reminder, we did an average. So this ultimately, you each have your own Z-score that was created for each review. I then average those two Z-scores to come up with the final Z-score to come up with that preliminary ranking. So I think that helps a little bit. I can take these for one more time if that helps.
So that
So you start on one
methodology,
foot and turn around 3 times.
Kind of.
so that methodology is more statistically sound than just using an average.
Yes, and it accounts for the variability between each of your individual reviewing much better and standardizes the process better. So
And the reason that we're doing that is because not all committee members reviewed all projects.
sure.
And so we don't want to have projects ranked higher or lower based on which review committee they got assigned. So
Exactly.
this is all in an attempt to make an equitable process.
All relative. Any other questions on the scoring? Ranking?
When the projects had multiple phases, the applicant requesting just for one phase. When you guys were kind of looking through them, do you think is there kind of a consistent approach you're using when you think about a mid-phase request as it relates to your certainty of the next phase? Or are there certain elements that made you feel more confident about, a mid-phase ranking as opposed to the project? And I'm thinking about specifically like the Patterson Creek project where, so it was 3 phases. This is the middle phase. Are there certain elements about how it related to its later phase that made that mid-phase feel less stable or viable?
For that particular phase, so, the project or the total, we would like to see it done. I think for that particular phase, when looking at how it aligns with the PFA priorities and where some of those funds are going, may have affected where that one ranked, just kind of saying that,
So
part of
that's
it
about
was
phasing more about
the projects
physical
itself.
attributes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So looking at the budget, and which items were underpinning our priorities and which items were still in the budget, but maybe not supportive of the priorities of the program.
Yeah, for me, I think that if it's a phase project, like I was trying to look at just the project that was coming, like that we were specifically looking at, and that being the main source of like where my comments came from. There were sometimes times that I would make comments and I'd usually try to flag those within my review as like, this is for future, like if it was a planning project, it's like, okay, this needs to happen in order to move on to implementation, but these benefits aren't going to be realized unless it is implemented, or there are some things that maybe should be considered when thinking through the planning. And so I'd maybe flag some of those comments or concerns, but try to keep them separate when determining the overall rank. And I think in terms of like, 1, 2, 3 phase, like if there has been a project that had a similar work done, like phase 1 was already completed, like, well, there's something there because they've proven that they can do this first project, and they're likely, in my head, that means that they're likely to know better what the budget might need to be for future phases. So I did have some of that in consideration, but I didn't hold it against anyone if they didn't have a phase already done or things like that. And then I had a few projects too where like generally for restoration projects, you don't get 100% of your funding from one agency. Like it's split up, these are big projects. And so I tried to keep in mind like, okay, the PFA fund request is for this particular item. Does it make sense for the PFA money to go towards that or not? Even if like maybe the larger scale of the project seemed like it would be a good fit for PFA funds, but what they're specifically asking money for maybe wasn't, or vice versa. And trying to keep like that scale in mind as well.
And add to that too, and the multi-phase projects, if you do have the advantage of space, we look into that, usually district staff or whatever district it's in are familiar with those projects, so we can look at, how the first phase going, the phase before, and what were those outcomes, similar team, and so you do a little back research on that too to see, if you have some information on how successful.
Just going back to the Tuffy Creek for a second, I think in the narrative they mentioned the issue of leakage and snow, and had a little bit of traffic about that yesterday. But I just wondered if you had any more insight on that, because it just sort of caught my attention of a red flag when it's not like a flat tire, like leakage in the dam, something like it could be significant. If you had any more insight for them.
I guess, yeah, the conversation I had, it seemed like maybe that was slightly overstated within the application, and part of it not really knowing what extent is there leakage within that dam. You don't really know until you kind of start doing those design plans, but just yeah. And so I think once that happens, then they'll know more, but it seems like maybe it's like
And maybe I missed this because you got my new Excel pages or tabs. Is there one tab that shows advisory committee ranking and as well as W review committee ranking?
Yes. So the far right tab, I believe, says reviewer comments on it. And it says
Review comments and the far right is advisory committee comments.
They're separate, so it's not.
yes, that's not.
So
Yeah,
that's
it's not.
The reviewer regional. I mean, all the regional reviews. So, and then advisory committee would be one over on the right. Here we go, and then when you scroll, you've got there's all these comments.
But do we have one that has their,
Critical high.
No.
Of course.
Okay.
All right, so there's gonna be time for maybe one more question and then we'll move to the next review. Any other questions?
I was just gonna say, I really appreciated the department ranking of them part, because I think I heard you sort of say, you're gonna look at it a little bit on sort of return on investment. And for me, that was the hardest part, to sort of be able to evaluate having their input there, I think.
All right, thank you. Go to Region 2.
Kevin, correct.
My name is Kevin Gray. I'll be presenting for Region 2. Taking the time to be here today, and yeah. Before I move on, got a nice photo of a chunk salmon there. That fish is from the southernmost stronghold of chunk salmon in the world. Pretty cool.
take that photo.
Okay.
Cool.
I worked on a life cycle monitoring project for a few years.
And just for process, Kevin, are you open to questions during the presentation so we're not going back and forth?
Yeah, I think so.
And we'll keep an eye on the time to make sure that you have time to present on all of them. But if there's a question that comes up, maybe we can just pause and ask it.
I think we'll have plenty of time on.
Okay.
So,
See that, it's not.
All right.
We're off to a good start. A little regional context and background here too. So in this cycle, total of just a little more than 475,000 was requested through those 5 proposals, 3 of which for implementation, 2 for planning. Their priority rankings were 3 high, 1 medium, and low. Just 2 counties are presented. These projects this time, Lincoln County and Benton County. For context continued. So HCP species in the region include coho, chinook, coastal cutthroat, coastal chum, coastal giant salamander. In the mid-coast or region 2, ESA coast streams tend to receive bird funding. PFA grant provides funding for beaver conservation, area wetland restoration, and wood optimization. Common issues we see are degraded habitat due to agricultural practices, past forest practices, road and crossing structures, high water temperatures, declining inhabitants populations, effects of climate change, in-stream physical habitats such as gravels, water quality, quantity, temperature, things like that are primary factors. First project is the Beaver Creek Valley Scale Floodplain Restoration Design. This is through the Mid-Coast Watersheds Council. It's just for planning at this point. They're asking just shy of 50,000 this project. HCP species here are ESA, coho, cutthroat, and Pacific giant salamander. This project aims to finalize designs for a restoration project to restore stream and floodplain form, function, and processes in 37 acres of Beaver Creek Valley. Benefits anticipated are to restore floodplain connectivity, in-stream complexity, and healthy riparian habitat. Also to increase winter and summer rearing habitat for juvenile salmonids to build resiliency against the ongoing impacts of climate change. Co-benefits to coastal chinook, steelhead, Pacific lamprey, and beaver are also anticipated. Placement of large wood, planting of riparian vegetation, and installation of beaver dam anchors also will aim to restore stream and riparian function, processes, and habitat connectivity. Some additional notes here. Positive community support for this project for landowners, watershed councils, districts, as well as ODFW is demonstrated. One landowner also plans to use their property within the project area as an educational hub for schools, community members alike, to educate the community on the benefits of fish and wildlife habitat enhancement and how they adapt to the challenges of climate change. Another note on this, a little more than 92,000 in match funds is unsecured from that. It's a concern. These funds, it's mentioned, are for contract costs for engineering, Mid-Coast Watershed Council staff time, and grant administration. So with that, the regional priority ranking was high.
Just a quick question. Does the design work with the permitting for resource surveys?
Off the top of my head, I can't recall. I think there's been discussion of that.
pull up and it's for this project.
Or no, the previous.
Peter, sorry. All right, and you guys still all have access to the management system too.
Mhm.
I can pull up that stuff.
It's trying, it's really slow loading.
Yeah. Probably just on the same.
Yeah, this has been. I'll try to pull that up.
Next project is LC main stem riparian upland and wetland swale restoration. Again, this project comes from the Mid-Coast Watersheds Council for implementation. They're asking about 88,000 for PFA grant funds. HCP species here include coastal giant salamanders, ESA listed coho salmon, Chinook salmon, coastal steelhead, and coastal cutthroat. Project aims to restore 40 acres of degraded habitat along the 1-mile stretch of the Alsea River. Anticipated benefits include to enhance water quality and reduce stream temperatures. Also to establish a source of future large woody debris recruitment for spawning and habitat. The project aims to remove and reduce invasive plant species, increase stream buffer to 200 feet. Add 34 acres of native shrubs and trees, and maintain 6 acres of xeral habitat. Also to provide refuge and connectivity to both aquatic and terrestrial species. Landowners plan to place the property in conservation easement following project completion, preserving land, water.
Is that a voluntary conservation easement?
My understanding is, yeah.
So they're not receiving compensation for that?
I don't think so. Another note, this project also has $437,000 in total match funds, of which $326,000 is unsecured OF funding. Also a concern, but if not secured, the Watershed Council intends to limit restoration to just the Phillips Creek portion of the project. So we'd still be able to get something done, just not the entire project.
Do you know who would hold the conservation easement?
I believe the landowner. Project.
They would encumber the property through the conservation easement and hold that conservation easement by themselves.
I believe so, but it could be. All right, third project is the Honey Grove Oxbow reconnection design. This is in the Alsea River as well. Another one from the Mid-Coast Watershed Council. This is for planning. They're asking $173,000. HCP species here are coastal giant salamanders, ESA listed coho salmon, Chinook salmon, coastal steelhead, and coastal cutthroat trout. Project aims to restore hydrologic connection and fish passage to about a mile of relic oxbow channel in the North Fork Alsea. It's a pretty cool aerial photo there. It shows up on LiDAR. See the channel still exists. Benefits of the project aim to provide future sources of large wood debris for spawning and rearing habitat through a robust riparian restoration process. Also to preserve land as property owners aim to enroll in a federal incentive program for long-term habitat protection. The project aims to provide connectivity for aquatic species and important terrestrials such as Pacific giant salamanders, and address primary limiting factors for coho salmon recovery described in a note here, $275,000 in secured match funds from OF and Wild Salmon Center, combined to fund early and middle stages of the project. And the regional priorities for this project is high.
I have some questions on this one. So there was reference in it to completing a a letter of map revision in the application, and quite a bit of work impacting property owners. So who is the property owner impacted on this project?
I do not recall.
Because I think they noted it's not their property.
Right.
I'm one of the profile now, but we can pull that up.
Okay, did you find any confirmation of engagement with property owners?
Yes,
This was my,
they seem to demonstrate that. Two other projects reviewed. The Wright Creek Habitat Restoration Project, which asked a little more than $88,000 and PFA grant funds. A little bit about Wright Creek, 72,000 in match funds, 12,000 is unsecured OLED funding for site prep and systems. If the OLED funds are not secured, the project will still continue. Two of their priorities: planting native shrubs and trees and constructing habitat pods. Some questions that came up would be what actions would be taken if the invasives are reestablishing in 4+ years. Also, it's a question that popped up on that one was why not just add that 12,000 in the web unsecured funds that are last year.
Is that the only source of match? So maybe that's the justification for not including it, is that they receive that extra point in their scoring,
Right.
if they have match.
Right.
I'll pull up just marks your question. About one speed. Your question, Mark?
Like, if we reviewed it and we, like, we're gonna do all that preparation later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stick with the process.
If you have things you'd like to share.
I just have really big concerns if we don't have like the funds for maintenance of for repair and replantings, in my opinion, are critical to the success of the project. Whether or not makes it probably either
Sure.
on any project.
So we have an opportunity in this grant program to do this live post project implementation funding. And it's pretty clear option, yes or no, if they want to do it, and it's made for that kind of stuff. So my assumption would be if they don't select that, they have another game plan for that. But this grant program does allow it, it does encourage it, and it is discussed in our solicitation pretty heavily.
Yeah, it is. I think it should be, I mean, you'd hope they have another game plan, but I have seen a lot of failed restoration projects on the landscape. And the reason is that nobody dealt with the invasives. Just seen a ton.
To Frank's point, if there is another game plan, that should be clearly articulated in the application itself if they chose not to.
That's something like I'm taking some today too. You know, in the coming meetings, I like to do a recap of everything for this next year's solicitation, that kind of thing, and we can encourage them a little bit more. To come up with that plan.
Right.
You know, or they select no, it's implementation based, and it feels like a regular plans now.
Well, guys aren't
So let's
committed.
back to the conversation when we look at tomorrow, what projects shake out above that total funding line. And if those projects of that type are above the line, then we should have that conversation.
These are way down.
Chad, if I could,
Please.
Mark, you have one more question about the project budget, for the Beaver Creek project by Midcoast. You're asking if they had
I was just curious if the permitting was included in the budget or if it was,
You know, to ship
or it
off.
wasn't the.
Yeah.
So, right. The only part of Midcoast budget for the Beaver Creek Valley project, is their staff hours, to contractual costs, engineering. And then there is match identified from OWEB that could be paying for some of that. Would be an assumption that if you have a match for technical team and it'll be a W match. So as of now, no, but that match could be how they're getting the permit paid for.
It's more just a curiosity how they were, what the mindset was for putting together the application. It wasn't a consent.
Andy, on some of these projects, if there's clear alignment with a portion of the budget request and less alignment with another portion. Have we identified those applicants that are willing to accept a reduced funding?
Sorry, I may or not understand.
So if there is a project and they want to replace a culvert and they also want to repave the street. We say, we want to replace the culvert, but we don't want to repave the street. We will award you half the funding. Have we identified projects or have they self-identified that they would be willing to accept partial funding? Or how does that process work if we want to fund a portion of the project, but not the entire project?
So we haven't identified one that if they have partial funding, but there is for next year's solicitation, a question that says impact of this project, if it doesn't get fully funded. That came from conversations that recent. So next year we have that. I do know some of the narratives, they do say in there though, if we don't receive full funding, we're okay doing less. Just for the record, the committee does have a latitude to decide on partial funding.
Yes, yeah, we did that last year.
We did do it last year, correct. So there were some like projects that had fire resiliency built into it.
Yeah.
You know, although great idea merit, but I didn't meet the priorities of this funding and the committee chose to bless that. And I'll be seeing that on that going forward. And, you know, maybe how we work on approval tomorrow is like a 10% threshold. So I work with applicants over the next month to move that line, because we're drawing some arbitrary lines now. You know, I can pull up budgets and stuff tomorrow, but I can work on the back end, like this is what it really looks like.
Yeah, that would be helpful. And the one that comes to mind is the Patterson Creek Phase 2. Kelsey had mentioned that there were components of that that maybe felt a little out of scope, but the actual fish passage barrier, that clearly is in alignment. So would they be willing to accept a partial award?
Yeah, and just to also outline how that worked last year, so you guys maybe know the process. So say the project arbitrary number is 50,000. 10,000 of it was something that you didn't want to do, that was repairing a road or something. You guys approved the project as is for recommendations, less the notes that I'm taking and whatnot. I then approached the grantee between now and commission and spoke with them and said what we would like to fund. And then I worked with them on a revised budget to meet your guys' wants and the merits of it. So I think very detailed notes tomorrow. That's tomorrow's discussion. That's very much you tell me that, and I'll take the detail. And it worked very well last year.
Perfect. And that's exactly the kind of discussion that we can have tomorrow, because that is currently a $940,000 ask. And if there is $250,000 of that that is out of scope, we can pull projects like Beaver Creek and Coffee Creek that are currently under the line, identified as high priority or critical priority, up and fund more work by just making sure we're aligning components that fit projects in the whole.
Yep, and I'll be ready on the fly to work with you guys tomorrow for that. So
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions for Kevin?
John, this is for Mark Grunbauer and also the ODFW folks. Do you all provide input on OWEB proposals? More specifically, do you individually provide comments? No. Does ODFW as an agency? Yes.
Some people.
Do you communicate with the people who, Kevin, you were talking about, there's an OWEB proposal pending? Did you communicate with whoever the person was that got it?
Very little.
Okay.
So just, when I look at the proposals, I'm not pulling any comments from the regional review team. Keeping that separate. So if they can look at it's my review, it's not, you know, an official review. I do know, I can say that applicants that have applied to OWEB, all of you completed all of our regional review team processes, and applicants have been notified whether they were recommended for funding or not. And if they were recommended, what the priority ranking was. We're working on the staff funding plans right now. This will be out towards the end of they at least know whether they
Obviously, different state funding programs have different priorities and criteria, so you shouldn't expect that it's going to be the same. But
yeah. And we asked different questions about different criteria. So I'm not saying I don't think on my background, but
I've been around for a while.
I mean, that's appropriate to judge these applications independent of what you know about them.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would say too, there are several of the staff who are on those teams, people that are in my office, and in the case of the application cited those other funding sources, I did reach out to some of them about the project and the other funding sources and money was granted. But the process where it was workable.
Any other questions? Okay.
It's a joke.
Yeah, very well done. Thank you, Kevin. Up next, we've got AJ. Region 6.
Yep, we're good. All right, I'm AJ Van Donlen. I'm the PFA Student Bio for Region 3, Northwest Oregon. Got a full picture of all those PFA bios standing on a restoration structure. It's actually phase 1 of that I'll talk about here in a little bit. So in my region, we had 16 proposals that were submitted. Of those 16, 8 ranked out as critical and high. There's roughly $5.7 million requested across all 16 proposals. Had lots of really good projects. It was hard to narrow them down, get final rankings on them. Before I jump into the reviews here, they're going to come in 3 waves. I break mine up since I've got such a large area, basically by watershed, so it'll up to the field and then road. So it won't all be all critical at the top. It'll kind of get them contextualized because each of the areas in my region have pretty specific stressors and priorities. And as far as my reviews go, I tie in with the local staff out of each of those areas to come up with the rankings localized to them. So the first of our projects that I've got here is the Crane Creek concrete weir removal and fish passage restoration. This is a implementation project by the Smith River Watershed Council. This is on the west fork of the Smith River. There's actually 2 weirs in this structure. You can only see one here. There's one just downstream. It's kind of a wonky situation. These were actually put in to improve fish passage at one point in time. That culvert there in the past was not fish passable. And so they put these weirs in to raise the water level up and try to get fish up that stream. That culvert has since been fixed. And now they're looking to remove these 2 weirs to improve passage at this spot. So if these 2 weirs are removed, it would improve passage at low water flows to 40 miles of habitat. The habitat upstream has seen significant investment in stream restoration and passage restoration past. And they're planning to do continued restoration in the basin. And so due to the amount of habitat upstream that would be impacted, we have it as critical. The 2 species that we think would get the most benefit out of these would be fall chinook. As a lot of times they're arriving at a little bit lower water, so they might have a hard time getting over it, and then lamprey as well. And here's just, it's a little hard to see. There's an orange dot just a little bit up from the bottom there. That's where the project is. And then all the other dots upstream are habitat structures, either log and boulder or just log structures that have been placed in. Just to have the context of how much effort has been spent in this basin.
Just could you talk about the life cycle monitoring that's happening this below? I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm not tuned in a ton to it, but there's a long-term life cycle monitoring station downstream, and that's the lowest orange dot down there. They're in the screw trap. I'm not totally sure on if they're doing pit tags or exactly what they're doing there, but that would allow for tracking the benefits, presuming that program continues. that's also up in there right now.
20 years of data.
Yes. So. The next project we have is again, on the west fork of the Smith River. This is the Four Creeks in-stream habitat restoration project. This project proposes to do restoration on four tributaries to the west fork Smith River. One of those actually being Grand Creek, the one that you saw over there, as well as 3 others. This is in conjunction with, again, all that restoration that we have previously done in the basin. We have really good collaboration, both with the Watershed Council, the private timber landowners in the basin, as well as the federal landowners in the basin. Got a picture there of our habitat biologist out designing and like hanging flag for where they want to put structure in. But I include those 2 pictures because the Smith River is really simplified and channelized down to bedrock. And I thought those 2 pictures give a good overview of really what you're looking at. There's very little gravel in a lot of these systems, and by putting these structures in, we're hoping to upgrade a little bit of material and give fish a place to spawn, as well as increase productivity of those stream reaches. These would likely be the final entrance into these 4 streams. Right now, the roads are not passable. They would improve the roads to get in, place the structures, and then decommission the stream crossings on their way out. And so we have it ranked high, mostly due to the limited amount of spawning and rearing habitat provided by the scoured bedrock channel. So this is down in the Coquille Basin now. So the Sandy Creek Whole Watershed Restoration Phase 2. That picture at the beginning was us standing on Phase 1, we're instructors for that. This is an implementation project. Proposing to place, I believe, 28 structures over 1.3 miles of stream habitat. Much like the tributaries there I had in the Smith, I don't have a good picture of Sandy Creek. It is also scoured to bedrock, and there's very little gravel in stream. This project builds on good collaboration, both with the Watershed Council and the small landowners in the basin. Folks in there are excited to do work. This project would be the last of the in-stream work. And it would be the last for that because these are the last locations that we can get to the stream and that are suitable for in-stream structures. There is a proposed Phase 3. Phase 3 would not be in-stream work, though. That would be riparian fencing and planting projects on some of the other lands. The main benefits are, again, increasing critical spawning and rearing habitat for coho and chinook. And we have this one ranked as critical. And here's just a kind of an overview of this basin. So Phase 2 is the, depending on which section you're looking at, is either the purple triangles or the red or yellow triangles. And again, this would complete all the in-stream work planned for this basin. The next project, we're still in the Coquille Basin. This is the basin assessment for advancing the Coquille Coho Strategic Action Plan. This project is a planning.
Nobody order.
July upgraded.
Is this the song? One of the, I'm sorry, this came before you even going. No, keep
Make
going.
a note that AJ went out. It won't affect.
I don't think we have that one. It's okay.
No, this was, I had it updated. I missed it in my original
Okay. All right.
submission.
Carry on.
So this project is a planning and monitoring project that would monitor or survey 350 miles or 330 miles of gravel road, 135 miles of paved road. They'll be looking at some sediment delivery sources as well as fish passage barriers along that road. And then 125 miles upstream will receive a full AQI protocol. And AQI is our aquatic inventories project, and it has a long-standing protocol that folks can follow, and we match up with data that has been collected for the past 30 years now. And then they will do a streamlined version of the AQI protocol for 109 miles of in-stream habitat, mostly looking to see what has changed from when it was surveyed previously up to 30 years ago. This project is, again, aligned to provide data-backed restoration for the strategic action plan. And it would allow them to have targeted benefit value per dollar restoration projects in the future, since they'll have solid data backing.
That road system that's being inventoried, is that mostly public? Yes, entirely public?
I believe so. I think it was any flood table roads.
So gravel paved like.
Yes.
So you're using that claims.
Yes, the gravel roads great survey. I'm not totally sure if that was the same survey methodology they would do for the paved road sections.
Is this a first phase of assessment work in this region or is previous?
So they've done some assessment work in development of the strategic action plan. That's usually, they'll do like a phase and walkthrough where they identify stressors. But this is more granular on the ground level. Whereas that phase and walkthrough would have been like an in the office exercise with all the partners getting together.
The strategic action plan, what's the ink date on that? Like, how recent is that plan?
2022 or 2023.
Actually, they're just finalizing their proposed strategic action plan. I think the final version is out in printer right now as we speak, so it's in the final conclusion. But these are some of the data gaps that they've identified as needing to be, for example, like they've already done this kind of basic assessment in Sandy, 12 Mile Creek, and probably some others. So this is filling in some of those data gaps, and the basin plan is very current.
And I did want to highlight too, these strategic action plans are built on partnerships, and this project has very good support with all partners that are involved in the strategic action plan. This is also a project that, if need be, could be funded partially. I believe they have 5 local subbasins, and it could be pared down to less subbasins of surveys if needed. Of course, they would prefer full funding for efficiency's sake, but it was noted that they could accept partial funding. All right, now we're moving down into the road. This project's the road estuary rearing habitat. It's an implementation project, constructing a tidal slough habitat in the road estuary. It would be 11 acres of tidal habitat that are reconnected. In the road and coastwide, these habitats are limited and have been heavily impacted through human development. The road specifically did not have a ton of this habitat to begin with, just due to its valley form and length of tidal influence. So getting a chance to increase some of this very valuable habitat in a basin that does not have much to begin with was identified as a critical priority. And it's rare that we have the opportunity to increase access to this kind of habitat, as it's often high value for human uses. And then this is just a picture of the proposed tidal slough connection. Right now, it's somewhat decked off, and there is no connectivity presently. There's a gravel mining operation.
Can I go back to that one?
Yep.
So this is just educating me on projects like this. What's the timeline for this project, including like implementation, but then after implementation, especially when you talked about this going from not a lot of habitat to some habitat, how will you know, like, what's the timeline for knowing, monitoring?
I do not, let me pull up their.
Or is that part of the project? Maybe I should ask.
I do not remember what their monitoring plan was off the top of my head.
Based on the project.
So it looks like they've done some pre-monitoring in 2021.
I could probably fill in some of your answers, but I'm just really familiar with this project, so. And the reason I'm familiar with it is because OEM provided the funding for the technical assistance, design work that designed the project, so it's ready to go. It's just up from a project that they implemented a couple of years ago on launched a new sloop. So if that's a project we've already done, monitoring work going on. So it just moves that work upstream. So it's ready to go.
I do have a detailed timeline. It's pretty complex. I can send it to you though. Our application. This talks about the whole.
Yeah.
But it outlines it.
Mark, to get back to Courtney's question in terms of how do you know, what's the monitoring on the first phase that you mentioned? What do they do with presence actions?
They were, there was temperature monitoring, I believe. There was, there was huge, part of the work was getting rid of invasives like IV, things like that. So there's a lot of that kind of bot monitoring.
No, so not so much fish use to see if smolts are actually.
Yeah, that I'm not for sure, but I know there's something that the folks got pretty robust monitoring program, the Curry County folks, but I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I do have their draft monitoring plan open. They will be monitoring for fish presence absence as well as be doing it twice per year, spring and fall. And they'll be doing minnow traps as seine nets and electrofishing if need be. This is just a draft monitoring. It's not fully fleshed out yet.
Thank you. Sorry for the.
Oh, no worries.
If you're ever in Gold Beach, it's a really cool, the original project is really cool to look at. There's an interpretive trail, so you can just go on through it if you.
That's cool. That's interesting.
Cool. The next project that I've got is the Fruitdale Drive culvert replacement project. This is an implementation project looking to replace 2 culverts on Fruitdale Creek to trip to the Road River. Both of these culverts are currently assessed as impassable, and full replacement of these would add 1.3 miles of access to habitat. It adds access to potentially cool water refugia, and the road in this part of the system is highly stressed by temperature. So it's if we're able to increase access to that cooler water refuge where fish can rear, that's a high priority for the district. As such, we haven't ranked it as high. This is the West Fork Trail and Chicago Creek Fish Passage Project. It's an implementation project. It would improve passage by replacing 2 undersized culverts to be replaced by either bridges or 3-sided culverts. They haven't settled on a final design yet. It would add access to 5 miles of habitat. It would improve access to lands that have been impacted by previous timber harvest activities. There's also future in-stream restoration that is being planned and developed in these streams upstream of this project site, though that hasn't gotten off the ground yet. Due to the amount of habitat that this opens up, we have it as a high priority.
Is that, sorry. So that's private land, private.
The land is private. I'm not sure, the road may be BLM.
I think that's right. Actually, I'm sure that's right.
Yeah, so it would be happening on Manulife land. I'm pretty sure the underlying road ownership is BLM.
How does that work? Who's responsible in that case?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, from what our FRIA meetings, it is a headache to figure.
Right, because like if Manulife has to pay for it, then like, no offense, but
Well, it's the same thing we had with the warehouse application last year.
yeah, exactly. Like, hey, no, but if they aren't,
I believe the way the FRIA is set up is the underlying road owner has the responsibility. So if it's not a Manulife owned road, then it doesn't fall under the FRIA.
if that makes sense.
So in this case, in this project, design's already completed, or is
They are
design
not
part of it?
completed. They have not settled on bridges or the 3-sided oak bottom culverts yet.
So who? I think how to ask this. Okay. At some point, because you'll have to do, some people have to do the work, the design and the work, which means the control and ownership in all those cases will have to.
Correct. Yeah.
The clarity. So in the application, how do they demonstrate partner engagement or agreement with the project? And so this was something I pondered in a lot of them, just in the materials provided, kind of clarity and understanding of how owners were engaged in design phases and implementation phases, but then also monitoring phases. So if I'm asking these questions, it's partly because I was trying to find it in the materials myself.
Yep.
And it wasn't always super clear.
I think that, I believe last year, the year prior, we did assess having the landowner acknowledgement. And that was decided at the time that we didn't have that. We did have a form that was created for it, and we decided not to. So that carried over this year, but like I said, I am proposing to reconsider it next year for a discussion. But the application only talks about project partners and very broadly gives an update on it, and that's it. And that's kind of what we're landing on this year. So I'll definitely be taking note of that. And I really have to here to have more info on that because I agree with you.
Yeah, and BLM is the partner in this one. They're just not the applicant. BLM is doing our vote and NEPA on the project.
You said it is a BLM road.
It is BLM. It is good.
So they have medical responsibility for this.
All right, now we're on to Little View Fish Passage Project.
So you said you weren't sure what the design. Was.
Yep, so it'll either be a precast bridge or a three-sided open bottom culvert.
Because I think it's cascade solutions and stuff, so.
This project is a planning and design project for improvements at 3 diversion dams on Little Butte Creek. Right now, there is passage at all of these structures. However, that passage is not complete, and at different flows, there's varying levels of impairment for fish passage. The completed project would see improved passage to 53 miles of spawning and rearing habitat.
Say 53.
Yes.
It was like by comparison, last one was like 5, I think.
Yeah, well, so the bulk of this comes, there's one very low in the basin, and the bulk of it is upstream of that.
So they're not very interested in this.
Yeah, they're partial. Yep. Yep, and that's exactly what we found. 2 of them are irrigation diversions. One of them is a diversion that is operating as kind of like a museum piece now, operating an old grist mill. And that grist mill is going further downstream and providing a lot of that mileage.
State parks take that mill over, or what happened to that mill? I know
I
that
think the town.
the town did.
Yeah.
That's Eagle Point, right?
Eagle Point, yeah.
Yeah, it's right in town. It was an old grist mill. Yeah.
As with many of the streams in the road, access to cool water habitat, again, is a regional priority. We have this one ranked as high. It probably would rise to critical if we were planning to fund the actual passage portion. But being as this is just the designs, the actual uplift would be further out.
And gentlemen, don't need to discuss it now, but if we could just flag this planning versus implementation distinction, because
It would be really helpful.
yeah. And I don't think we need to do it quite that way. So I ranked some planning projects really high, so I thought they were really good planning projects, but obviously we want to put dollars in them too.
It is one of the, I mean, obviously it's one of the categories that we accept proposals in, but I agree with you. I'm like, I want to see action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we certainly accept the proposal, but that doesn't mean that it will necessarily outrank implementation projects.
Mhm.
Especially if we're considering, for that cost, if there's an aggregate of other implementation in the aggregate higher priority, we can choose that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or we
Yeah, and I would just say, if we just get so many good implementation proposals, that's who we become. We shouldn't clear with. That's who we are. So. But on the other hand, I saw there was an amphibian plan proposal that I reviewed. I really, for you guys, I scored it really. I'm like,
Yeah.
It was much. It's not.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. But it's a conundrum, I think.
And some of that will be driven by the applications themselves, and what types of applications we're seeing over time.
I think it's great though, because it gives us a place to have a dialogue about it. And I'm not somehow above understanding better when we get to that point and having it reframe my thinking, but at least we can talk through the perspective.
That's good.
Then we'll move on to the medium priority projects. I'll just hit some quick bullet points on these. The Road River and Illinois Valley Flow Restoration projects. These were very difficult to come up with how much value they provide. They're not the normal restoration projects that we're used to reviewing. They're both irrigation efficiency projects as well as planning for more efficiency projects down the line. Where we landed was that the biggest benefit is probably getting our foot in the door with the irrigation land use group. It's something that they've really struggled with in the Rogue Valley. They're over encumbered by irrigation withdrawals, and it's been very difficult convincing folks that we're not trying to take their water rights away from them. And that we're trying to help them out as well as help the fish out as well. Honey Creek is a good project. The reason we have it ranked as medium is just due to the scale of the project. It's a little smaller than the other ones that were presented as high and critical. It would provide a good low basin spawning habitat on Honey Creek. That's just upstream of the highway. And it would also improve public access to the land upstream. The invasive crayfish and monitoring project. We have this one ranked as a medium primarily due to lack of information on how much impact they're having on HCP species. We believe they are impacting HCP species, and having a good idea on the leading edge and how much biomass or how large the population of these invasive crayfish would be important if a management tool became available. However, right now there's no management tool to eradicate them. And the final one, Parrot Creek, we have that one ranked as medium. Our primary hangup on this one, the removal of the dam, we're in support of upstream of the dam. They proposed retrofitting 2 culverts with baffles, and those were not our preferred solutions for that. And then upstream, the habitat's pretty degraded. I actually live on this creek, and as much as I would love to see fish coming up there, it's not great habitat.
So you caused the degradation, is that what you're saying?
I'm in well after.
Would you say your opinion's biased on that project?
And then our low priority or not ready for funding projects, these were things that we did not feel particularly fit the PFA funding source or weren't quite ready for funding it. So with that, I'll take any outstanding questions.
AJ, what's your, on the Illinois Valley ones?
Yep.
Way back when I was the director of the Oregon Water Trust, the first permanent transfer, one of the first permanent transfers of a water right to in-stream flow on Sucker Creek. There hasn't been a ton of consumptive water right transfers since then, which we saw a lot of focus on this irrigation efficiency. Is there any opportunity lower value properties to just buy the water rights as opposed to putting in sprinkler systems that are yielding small amounts of water for long? What's your sense?
I think that's going to be a hard road to go down. It's being that it's tied into property values. We do now have a water flow specialist, and hopefully he's making some inroads down there. But as of now, I haven't heard of any big water statements.
Mark, what are you seeing in the Southwest region more generally, just in terms of water transactions as opposed to infrastructure projects?
We have recently, well, over a year ago, we funded the Trout Unlimited engagement grants to the landowners in those kind of conversations. But it's tough. I know they've been able to come up between 8 and 12 projects out of it, but people think the use of the conserved water statute is probably more appealing because you can keep your water. Keep your water. You can transfer a portion of it to other lands and then put some in stream. But we are seeing more proposals, but I think, as AJ said, there's a value to the land, the water that people see as a lot for it's already.
Well, you got to pay them enough money.
Yeah. A good conversation to have over the year.
Mark and I used to work on these things many minutes ago. Southwest region.
Quick question, Andy. I know applicants get feedback, so on the lower priority projects, will there be information telling them why they're not good fit or things that they should do with future submissions?
So while we don't actively push out, our reviews, we do encourage it in solicitation too. We say, please, we encourage everyone to come back. So when I do send an email after commission next month, if everything gets awarded, we do notify those who didn't get funded, and there's a link in there I actually insert that says if you'd like feedback, click on this link and it will go through the process, and I will meet with them, and I have a whole process set up for that, which I think we reviewed and ended up reviewing last year after it, or at some point. And that's when there's an opportunity. So I'll first send them a document that overviews everything and does actually compare each categorical thing like clarity, technical soundness, scores. So they'll see that, and then they have an opportunity thereafter to set up a one-on-one with me and to stream bio if they're available. So that's kind of what we're looking at. So it's kind of possible like two touch points there. First, it's the download of just the review sheets, kind of anonymous. It's not what you guys see.
You don't throw EJ under the bus for those.
Exactly. So, and then real quick, if I may, I said, the committee a new email, thanks to Kirsten over there, that compares the rankings, between the two. So it's just a sheet that shows the project, where it sits in the committee rank and where it sits in the regional as a critical, high, low, medium priority. It should be in the top of your inbox. So thanks to Kirsten, be able to pull off that real quick. Thank you. Was able to fix it up.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, we have that.
I'm curious, so I already had something going on in my personal thing, so I just had to modify it a little bit to send out, so.
Yeah, and I think it was last year. I think we had it in there, and I think I just forgot. Thank you.
Jeremy shaking his head like, really?
I'm not surprised. I would expect you.
Nice.
And we thought it was Andy. Well, you did say. it.
I did.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Give credit.
You did give it.
Well, that brings us to the end of the first three review regions. Folks ready for a break? We're about an hour ahead. So if we make a break, then we can come back for the next couple.
If you want to do, the agenda to come back at that time, or do you want to do like a 30-minute break right now?
I think we can just take a 30-minute break and then we will reconvene and have regions 4 and 5.
Yeah, 2:30.
Good.
Okay.
30 minutes is a long time.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's like a big.
And do 20 years?
Well, lose some mojo.
Well, we could do 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's gonna work.
Just hearing.
I think we're all giving 15.
We have 15 minutes, and I'll turn off the video right now.
Thanks.
I'm like, no, I gotta go do some work. I've got I saw that.
It was on the calendar a month ago.
In the underneath the hood. The other part.
Yeah, we tried to invite you multiple times.
So it says if you like.
Yeah, we're at least pretty your time.
Okay, that's all. Yes.
I talk from my shot.
You good?
We're gonna sit.
Oh, yeah.
All right, folks, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So we've got Paul with Region 4. Go ahead and take a look, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so Region 4, yeah, my name's Paul Olmsted. I think most people are familiar with me here from last year. Been affiliated with NIBI a long time. I've spent a lot of time in the Willamette Valley, doing a lot of work. So kind of need on that review. And with that, we'll dive into Region 4. So I guess first, I'll say Region 4 covers kind of Columbia River all the way down to Colorado side of I-5. So this is all the West Cascade region. And drains all the, major sort of back rivers of the Cascades on the east side of I-5. So Region 4 highlights 13 proposals this time, everything similar to the statewide request. There was 4 applications, proposals for second round here, and then a lot more money asked. I think the previous one had 8 proposals and a $2 million ask. This one was up quite a bit with 13 proposals and 11.7 million requests. So a lot more interest, a lot more diversity of candidates. We have, I believe, like 4 watershed councils, 2 NGOs, 2 or 3 NGOs, 4 federal applications. That's unique to my region. Agencies requested. And then we had 1 private individual request. So, yeah, kind of more diverse across the board in my region this time. And I threw in another picture of Willamette Falls here to start off with. I think it's important in the Willamette Basin that Willamette Falls historically was a kind of a line in the sand or a sorter of life history and fish assemblages in the basin. Only the spring and winter returning fish, their steelhead and your spring chinook, could get above Willamette Falls during really high flows with snowbed and rain in the winter. So it locked out all your far migrating coho, chinook, summer steelhead, and things like that. So that'll come up in our review. And just a good thing to remember there. It kind of splits out a lot of the ESA lines for the basin. So a little more overview of Region 4, Willamette Valley, it's where all the people are. So we have a lot of population. And it's once again the east side tributaries on the West Cascades that I cover. And so starting from the north, we got the Sandy, moving down to the Clackamas, you have the Malala, the Santiam system, so the north and south, and middle Santiam is in there. And moving down to the Calapooya, getting closer to Eugene. And then Mackenzie River, and then the whole upper Willamette kind of middle fork complex there that has the closed fork and a bunch of other tributaries that are pretty massive. So, yeah, a lot of rivers that a lot of people live around, have a lot of people, and we have because of that we have a lot of ESA listed fish as well. So once again, below Willamette Falls, which is a lot there in Oregon City. You have your lower Columbia ESA listed species, so your spring chinook, still coho. And then above that, you have spring chinook, winter steelhead. Our bull trout present in the region. They've been reintroduced the upper Clackamas as a population. And the upper, or McKinsey and the Middle Fork, have trout introductions up there that feel well. So as far as the regional issues and priorities, the Willamette, Region 4 is similar to everything else: degraded habitat, water quality, stream complexity, and but a couple things that are becoming more of importance is our wildfire impacts. We saw the devastation of the 2020 wildfires. We're seeing the majority of those, short of one down in the Eages district, were all the West Cascade region. So we're seeing that fire interval increase and its intensity. So things to consider there. Also, I mentioned population. It's where the bulk of the population is in Oregon, so you have a lot more anthro effects there, and then high head dams. So I envy Kevin and Kelsey, talking about the coast and looking at their projects that are a lot simpler without the high head dam issues, and that's a big issue in the Willamette Basin and on the east side for Princeton area too. So Fish Passage, a lot of high head dams in the Sandy Ends, McKinsey, Middle Fork, to a certain degree in the Clackamas. Were designed without fish passage or with very poor fish passage, especially for out migrating juveniles. So there's just a lot of issues around this until that's addressed. And so it's something to really consider with these projects and where they're located in relation to your high head dams, where we're steering this money. So. And this is a map just looking at the dots show the projects. And the size of the dot is the money asked. So pretty good distribution throughout regions, all the way up to the big one. And the part there was up on the Columbia. And then I think 51 down there in the bottom was one that was down at Hill Street on the Middle Fork Willamette above Oak Ridge there. So it shows a little bit of the span of the region. So now, yeah, I guess I forgot to mention of those 13, we did rank 4 of them of high and critical. All 4 of mine came out high. I didn't have anything that I thought critical. Yeah, I got it. This one I think came close. Came closest to that. So, yeah. So Cove Creek Restoration Phase 3. It's another one of those phase projects that we talked about earlier. This is the 3rd phase. Trout Unlimited is the applicant. It's in the upper Clackamas, if you're not familiar with that area. So it's upper Clackamas. The Clackamas Basin does have multiple dams that PG&E operates in the system, but they're a little bit different. They're low head dams. They're very low pool heights. They've been very successful with fish passage upstream and fish passage downstream. So the Clackamas is actually doing really well with all anatomy and fish passage there. It's a little bit of a different beast than we get into the sand yams and the Middle Fork with those massive pool heights of several hundred feet. You try to work juvenile fish primarily coming out. So it does have some dams downstream of it. This is in the upper Clackamas portion up on federal land, and kind of the headwaters out there. Here's a big bottom area, which is really high in terms of spawning with restoration of coho, steelhead, everything up there. And this is just slightly upstream of that. So really good location, high conservation potential, a slew of ESA listed species, because once again, the Clackamas is downstream of Willamette Falls, so you're getting all those stocks in there. It's building on, it's a phase 3. It's building on, I think, 3rd phase of Cove Creek, but also there's been other restoration nearby, the Big Bottom and some of those other areas. So, large wood project, placed at 927. But I believe the majority of that has been salvaged from the Riverside fire there, and treating that in over 4.5 miles via helicopter, and they've done similar work to this area. So, pretty experienced team, and yeah, because I think this is a good project. I know the district. I talked with the district staff in Clackamas, and this is the one. There's multiple in the area that we're really excited about, and a lot of potential for this one. So only real concerns are the wood has been sitting now from salvage from the Riverside fire. There are some concerns about the condition of that wood. They did mention some other sources for potential wood sources if needed, that they can do that would be from some adjacent floodplains. So, yeah, this one came out as high ranking. Any questions about that one?
What year which fire did you say that was? That was the,
I think the Riverside.
is that one of the 2020?
Yeah.
When you talk about the issue of the degraded wood, is that just that it will hold up during transport and installation?
I think both. Yeah, I think how it'll hold up in that, and then also just the longevity certain stuff. It's already starting to doubt out. Okay, yeah. Here lose lifespan, but decades.
If they have to switch to a different wood source, would that change the cost?
I don't think so. I can't remember. I could look that up, but I think they had, I can't remember, this other federal land source. That. Do you want to look at that now or do you want to come back?
Why don't you carry on? Maybe you pull that up.
I missed the question. What was it?
Can you verify if additional wood coming from another source is going to increase the budget?
Yeah, they mentioned that at the grant.
For February.
Assuming that different wood is green trees that are gonna be cut, so it won't have the same issue.
Yeah, yep. So we are under, yep. Okay, so moving on. So Pin Rock, this is a site on the McKenzie, kind of the middle McKenzie in the Pin Rock area. If you're familiar with McKenzie Basin, kind of middle river. Implementation, the McKenzie River Trust is the applicant. They do a lot of work all around the McKenzie, do great work. This is a site I'm really familiar with. I spent a lot of time at Ross Research Lab doing a lot of spring Chinook work in the Willamette Basin. And we used to go through and snorkel seeing and detect juvenile Chinook through this braided complex. It was a really highly productive juvenile Chinook rearing area. So really familiar with the site. As you can see too, the 2020 wildfire burned this over. And so there's some fire impact there, but that braided complex that you can see there is the project area. And they've already done a bunch of work and they acquired it. It was 2016, 18, something like that, I want to say, of the property. And since then they've opened it up. There was an old pond back there that had a bunch of invasives in it. I think there was some gravel mining in there. And it was an old historic, I think, logging camp back in the day. It was a timber company that had a bridge over it. It was an old camp out there on this island. And they since have opened it up. You can see it was already a really complex area with a lot of side channels and rearing, and they opened it up even more. That whole piece kind of closest to the Kingston River was all, as I remember, was kind of shut off. And there was a side channel that took off kind of out of the picture there that fed a lot of it since they opened it up. So they've already done a lot of work there. And this is implementation is really for going in and doing invasive removal and planting kind of that 150 acre area. So more of an upland riparian type project, but just a really productive location. Really prime spring Chinook rearing and some spawning in there. And then it does have some bull trout youth, the local bull trout in the river of the basin, but they do move down times of the year and move down into that habitat as well. So concerns, the vegetation and retention, as Fran mentioned, like planting projects are always really hard to maintain. And welfares take a lot of effort and a lot of years of knocking down those invasives. The McKenzie River Trust, I know, is aware of that and done a lot of it, but there's always a concern with that. They also did mention this R3 approach to planting, where they go out and basically just go for plant everything, and then kind of see what sticks and see what survives. is the way I read it. I wasn't real familiar with that. And so, I wasn't sure like how much that's been used in these kind of floodplain riparian areas. They did cite some more upland areas and using that process. So there's always, I think, some uncertainty with plantings and how much maintenance and follow up there's going to be. I think it was built in, they have, I think, 3 to 5 years and maintenance built into that. But that was the only thing I could find that was concerned with that. So for that reason, ranked high. And yeah, any questions about that?
I guess, from your perspective, it seemed like they were doing a lot of planting on the islands themselves. What does that do for the covered species as far as uplift? If it's not riparian planting, but in those island areas, how does that provide you?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I mean, I would think, so the stuff adjacent, you know, we did that and shading and whatnot. I'd say just the, I think stabilizing, keeping invasives out and stabilizing those, you know, gravel and island complexes, you know, for hyper flow, things like that. Yeah, as far as like a direct, you know, benefit to the species, you know, like amphibian use in those areas. So yeah, that might be a stretch and get out of the riparian zone.
Right.
Yeah. There's potential. I mean, it's a pretty dynamic island there. I don't know. It gets stable enough. I don't think you're going to get inundation or channel carving through there. So just thinking, you know, maybe you get large wood recruitment or whatnot, but maybe out of the smaller complexes there, you know, might see those move around. And have potential blip later on, but as far as the main island there, I don't know how stable that is or how that's going to be.
You probably see some large wood recruitment as those standing dead begin to fall.
The invasive mostly reed canary grass or?
You know, fairly blackberry,
Yeah.
Scotch broom.
Yeah, I think there's Scott's broom. Yeah, I think it's Scott's broom and the blackberry.
And then we're going to be using herbicide for that.
Was EWEB mentioned as a burner? So you can water north or Eugene pulls drinking water. I guess. That's benefit. Eugene would.
don't know.
No, normally Mackenzie would trust them, but close to it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, they have some overlap lines in there. I don't know. No, they, yeah, you're right. I think they do work with you a lot. I don't know. I don't know if they reference EWEB in this one here.
That's a really nice example, right in June.
You can see it after that burn too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really changed it a lot. Good on that one.
Be able to find the.
Yeah, for Cup Creek. So just two things real quick. One, looking at their budget, they just have budget for actual cost for helicopter replacement. There is matching fund with the Forest Service, and they do have in their narrative right here. It says that additional logs are needed for the project to prevent degradation of the current log deck. The USDA Forest Service currently has a separate contract in place with nearly $3.5 million to source logs for restoration work over the next 5 years. So they don't, and they said that no additional funds will be needed to store logs, to more logs that they needed for the project.
So they're saying they're going to be able to get the work done and we can pay for the helicopter. The logs will be taken care of either through the existing logs or they've got contracts.
Yes, that's exactly what they're saying. They don't have any extra stuff in their budget, no for the ones, just $5.
That answer your question.
You get that?
Oh, no,
Logs are good.
logs are great.
Yeah.
More wood.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Andy. So now, another one ranked high, the mechanisms of habitat change and stream amphibian responses in large birds. This was the USGS research office there. It's a research and monitoring grant, $876,000. Looking at a slew of salamanders across the Cascades, looking at kind of responses to the 2020 wildfires, and basically change, in those upper headwater streams, and assessing amphibian impacts and habitats on both public and private land, kind of across the whole West Cascade. So a huge scope of area, a multi-year, 3-year project, looking at amphibian response and quite a few of the HCP species. The Cascades kind of has, it's kind of a hot spot for a lot of those, as I understand it, orange salamander, and that was one too that's unique to the one of the other salamanders. But anyways, so it has the 3 of the listed amphibian HCP species on there, and has implications for directing how the amphibians respond to these changes, and also what's best management practice, and also potential. When I read it, I thought of where to direct potential restoration, or what the needs are of the amphibian species that we don't understand and don't have a lot of information about. So, yeah, and then some of the concerns are, just even the applicant noted that the difficulty to get clear, concise information in these really broad scale, massive research studies like that, challenging environments, headwater streams and stuff like that. So for that reason, I ranked it high. I know some other folks did in the review, and so be interested to talk more about this one. And then last year, a lot of the kind of research and monitoring got kicked around a lot, where we're at on that. But this one to me seemed like it filled a big data gap, for amphibians and PFA, and how we're going to move forward with restoration go, where we target work for amphibians. So
Matt, on this one, I was excited by it at first. I was like, research on amphibians, and now I'm just remembering the discussion. I think Jennifer, you were at the center of it about research that you all were going to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't at the center of it, but I added to it.
You added to.
Yeah, and I don't remember where we landed on this. Maybe you might want to fill us in, but the adaptive management program has, as part of their PFA mandate, to address amphibians. And it just says amphibians, the topic is general. They are currently right now going through the process of identifying what those questions are going to be. And as soon as they have that question package of what kind of questions or research they want done, it goes to the science team to then formulate kind of what that might look like and get stuff funded. Timing wise, they're still a ways out, I would say, for anything's funded. But I don't remember when we landed on the question we had last year about whether research like this even counts under this program, or if we should send these people to the AMC.
I think we landed with these types of research projects being handled by the IRST,
Right.
the adaptive management policy.
Okay. Yeah, because I thought we were only going to fund research projects under this grant program if it had an actual restoration nexus.
The example was the one that was Alan was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brook trout, the XY, XX stuff with the trying to sterilize brook trout. So, yeah, carry on.
I remember that conversation from last year.
I did not remember until now, so thank you for that. And I guess it does beg the question whether we should be more clear to potential applicants so that they don't take the time to submit. We're doing amphibian research.
Yes, I think that's a point very well.
Do you have on that regard?
I just thought it maybe
The AMC and IRST, the research that they're looking into, is that directly focused on how the Forest Practices Act affects these amphibian communities, or is it possible to be more broad scale for things like this?
I don't remember exactly. They're limiting the scope. The question is It's pretty general, but it's essentially, it would be focused on, the PFA changes. It should be somehow tied to private forest court changes. Yeah, so I don't know whether, like, when they go down their decision-making path, we're halfway through, they're gonna kick stuff out if it has a broader nexus. I would think maybe not, but it would have to have some connection. Like last year, we talked about the project that was for funding with the PFA grant program, and it was mostly on federal lands and that seemed like, okay, well, that's a bit of a stretch. But some of our gaps on amphibians that we have, some of them are very much forest management because some of them are very generic about distribution and range and occurrence, basins and stream classes and such. We have some information on that, but there's some gaps.
And this would align explicitly with that because the language to inform best management practices, that is for the adaptive management policy.
That's right of work.
Yep, no, it's right over.
Any other questions on this one? Okay.
So next, reroute and restore Hill Creek Ball Knob site, Crestwell, Oregon. So, yeah, located just south of G Crestwell. Actually not too far from, yeah, that is 5 right there, Manhattan Highway. Goes toward the Land Watershed Council. This is a bundle, kind of a planning, implementation, community engagement, all wrapped in one. 800,000. HCD species, native salmon is the cutthroat only. This is really out of all the anatomy down there. They have documented giant salamanders. The project does have beaver activity around and some lamprey use as well. So good for those. It's going to open up. So the gist is there used to be an old mill site there, and used to run the creek down and go the mill. So that is currently there was a dam there too for the water. So the project aims to that dam, fill in the little log ponds and just reroute the stream back to its original channel. I think they have historically routed it down through the mill, have that dam and help water back to the mill. So you can see there the yellow line on the map there is where they're going to reroute it back to its original stream and kind of decommission the old stream, the dam, fill in the old ponds. There's already been a bunch of work to check the site for toxins and things like that. Anytime you go work in the mill site, a lot of times you can get held up by all the leftover remnants, chemicals and things like that. That stuff's all cleared. The landowner's on board. It's a really good partnership. The community's on board with it. Opens up 8.5 miles habitat that's currently being blocked. That dam and barrier is on the VFW barrier list, so that's always kind of apt to get a barrier off that list. Yeah, so a good project. Yeah, cutthroat only, I think is the only reason, maybe to rank critical. And it also, it's hard to say, it's a speculation, but there is, can't remember if it's slightly upstream or downstream, there's a community pond where they did have the creek feeds into, and there wasn't put in the managed and planted, and due to poor water quality issues, they stopped the stocking of that. So the idea was water quality in that community. So the district down there was excited about the whole project and that potential to have, the popular fishery for the youth and the people as well there. So kind of a side benefit that could occur.
Well, there's documented presence of giant salamander, so it's not like they might be around, but it's a checkbox. There's actual salamanders present.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I believe, the Watershed Council.
What happens to the project once it's completed and for maintenance and long term?
I can't remember, there is going to be some repairs. the day when there, I can't remember, planting wasn't a big part of it, I can't remember, there's gonna be much maintenance, but is it gonna be a full reconstructed channel on the bypass there? That's where a lot of the cost gets expensive there.
And so who will own?
It's still the same landowner, it's one landowner. They
So
will-
ultimately, they'll fall into a responsible.
Potentially, yeah, for maintaining, yeah, and once the channel reconstructed, there'll be much maintenance on that part of it.
Yeah.
Any of the plant maintenance and bases, the channel, I think should take care of itself. Much better.
Does this include any work under the I-5 crossing, or is that passable? Good to go.
That's right, yep, I think that's all taken care of, yeah, so it doesn't include any work around there, it's just around the mill site. And the only concern on this, there's no way, yes, they listed species, so we're not looking at it. Spring Chinook, or that's out of the winter steel distribution. So there,
Do you know this project on the ground?
I don't know, the district down there, Gene, is very familiar with it, they were a partner on it. So I've, anecdotally heard from them about it, they're really excited about it, they're really supportive of it. And it's very high on their list to get that barrier out of there. But I haven't read it out.
Oh, you said that they had already done the surveys to make sure there was no contaminated.
Yeah, they're all done. So it does the for there. Great. And then, so that was it for my ones I ranked high. And then I just had a slew of these medium priority sites, projects, had some difficulties, had some tough ones to evaluate and really think about their uplift. And so I kind of quickly pick through these. I didn't rank them top to bottom, but I will say it was top three or kind of the three that I ranked higher out of those mediums. So starting with the Kelly Creek Dam removal restoration project that was in the Sandy River Basin, right at Mountain Head Community College. If you're familiar with that, there's a pond right on the campus, and that dam that creates that lake pond there is what they're potentially going to remove. So this is for planning. Once again, we talked about earlier, this is just the preliminary planning design for that, and setting up, having that dam removed, having that channel reconstruction, and restoring that habitat there and opening up. I believe it's 4 miles upstream of that on the trip to Beaver Creek there. That wasn't much information on the habitat quality of that creek upstream there. It's very urban, goes through kind of depression area and whatnot. So I don't know if it's a real high quality stream. Has potential there. There is a really popular put and take fishery there. So that there were some concerns there with the district. So not that project, I don't know how much uplift there will be. I'm definitely putting my solar bank out of there and getting, that lake pond there, but pretty a lot of water and besides the down to sand and sealant tributary Beaver Creek, which is really close. I think it's within half a mile of that. So there are some water quality issues there, potential uplift for that, but this didn't break out quite as high for my review. And the districts down there. Next would be the Sand Prairie floodplain restoration. That was upper Middle Fork Willamette, kind of east of Oak Ridge, above Hills Creek Reservoir. And the idea there was a Middle Fork dumps into Hills Creek Reservoir, and it's almost like the head of tidewater estuary area, right where it meets the reservoir there. And they didn't call it stage 0, but I'll see what they wanted to just do a really large floodplain pullback, like tons of excavating, opening up like a really broad floodplain there. And do the project, Forest Service was the applicant. A lot of earth and water, a lot of movement, really expensive. And, there are fish outplanted up there, there are multiple trout present, but just one of the things for me that held it back a little bit was just the number of high head dams, and we do have reports, and we have multiple high head dams. So uplift to other listed species is limited there. And then something I grappled with a lot of these, there was, I think, 4 projects in my area that were federal, applicants is there, the 50% just makes these projects so expensive. You get it that bang off and really analyze them when there's a $250,000-$300,000 markup, and so they didn't rank as high for me in that, and I think I would, as a reviewer, like to have seen more partnership there. We work with watershed councils. I think this project adds attractive. Federal indirectly. So that was an issue on that one as well. And then Elk Rock Island, that was one I saw that ranked up over the years. Another good project right down in the tidal estuary portion of the Willamette, right near Milwaukee. There's a kind of a public park right there. That site, I actually looked at the site with the Clackamas and Commercial Council. Another pretty good project. It's a kind of a backwater slough channel, a really unique habitat. There's not many of those types of habitats. Below Willamette Falls is Willamette Falls and tidally influenced. Below the confluence of the Clackamas, you have a lot of different PSA fish from the Willamette and from the Clackamas coming out. Potential rearing. Relatively small side channel, and the hang up for me on this one was those 6 log jams, but they were relatively small, so just the impact and very potential was somewhat limited for the ask, and also for they have a lot of money for other areas, just kind of now invested in it for the uplift there. They mentioned that they have other feedback that was similar. To increase those log jams and put a lot more wood in. It's one of those spots that I think you can add a lot more wood and make these structures a lot bigger just to provide more uplift. So that's the main hang up for me, is that they mentioned that their design and plans could potentially have that, but it wasn't the end. It was around their application. So, but a good community outreach, really. A lot of public outreach potential at that spot. It's heavily used by the neighborhood, just kind of the community of Milwaukee there for the summer, just to hang out, public access trail system there.
I think it's sort of a combined argument, but there's not a lot of extra habitat in that whole stretch of the river. So,
yeah, and there's like this one I really picked around a lot. This is one that I think there's some discussion. This one. In my mind, because there's just that little Willamette is, just doesn't have a lot of that type of habitat. So they were good in selecting the site and finding that. And then the River Creek rewilding. This is one that came up on the last cycle as well. South San Diego Watershed Council. This one's still just more of a upland planting. This is just of this property along the Little Creek picture of the South San Diego, just a very small amount of repairing that they're working with. A lot of more than work is upland planting, so I just didn't see a whole lot of uplift potential. There's some there, but not a lot with that project, so it ranked down a little bit more. And then the other two, the Perkins Creek AOP, and then the Brighton Bush watershed, I think, was really kind of fell into that same category of their fish passage projects. They're removing partial or full barrier fish passage structures. There are some high head dams in the system blocking them in the Brighton Bush in particular. Reservoir and whatnot, so that's potential limited there, and we both fell into that same kind of federal issue of the markup on was so extreme, and the Ryan Bush watershed in particular. It was replacing 3 culverts for almost $3 million. So I just sort of see the kind of return of what the kind of goal, with the cost of the. So. Once again, would have liked to see a better partnership, especially for the partners people in here. On to work with a watershed council, but that's some other work there. To bring that significantly. Then the last 3, here, low priority and not ready for funding. Tyron Creek. Oh, there's another kind of urban. What's the like? I'll see the very small creek. Just a really small, like the actual implementation portion of it is just a small 10-acre portion along there, just for the non-ast. It was kind of a 2-headed project. We wanted that small 10-acre mainly riparian planting portion, and then there was a management plan for the state park that was land adjacent. So it's kind of 2 pieces there. And let's see if they should come back or split that out. And just didn't think there was a whole lot of potential there and whatnot. And the other 2 were do not fund. One was more research, Portland State. I don't know who got to review that one. It's really interesting. They wanted to do genetic work. It sounds like a really fun project. Studying red band travel on the east side and trying to find markers for their tolerance to high side pressures on the east side and potentially bring in west side school as climate changes. And it was really interesting. Got me thinking a lot about all kinds of other, work you could do and GMO fish, to try to get them to survive different environments. The main hang up there is, and I've kind of forgotten, like where we're at on research, but was just consultation with what EFW and NOAA fisheries and potentially would be modifying species of ESA listed fish. There yet, and I don't think there would be support for that for the actual management practice. So, and then the big dams counts at Bonneville Dam was another applicant who was and I don't know if you guys remember that one. We wanted to build cages to the bottom of the fish ladders, the Bonneville Dam seals out for fish to be protected. To airlift in these giant cages and connect them to the Army Corps of Engineers dam. So it just wasn't feasible for a number of reasons to be considered.
Last year, there's in the budgets. The Salmon Council at Bonneville, putting budget items for 2 years of $165,000 salaries for the individual that's in line. Probably not the best use of that money. Another was on that Portland State research project. There's tuition waivers for graduate assistants. There's travel costs. There's conference costs to go and present research. That one is out of scope in several areas. Not the least of which is just how you plan to spend the money. Certainly not for tuition reimbursement. High annual salaries for the applicant themselves.
That was it. That was the 13. Yeah. Questions?
I think last year we had a project that you presented as a clackamas with a lot of large woody debris replacement. I just wondered if the Cove Creek one was similar or proximal to that one, or related, or just 2 different stretches completely.
Yeah, somewhat. Annie, I visited that. Turned out great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Project turned out fantastic. Actually. See,
Those are helicopter replacement.
Yeah, they just included their final the project completion report. So in the process of marketing and reviewing everything now.
I think I saw put on that on TV, if I remember.
Yeah, YouTube too. I think I pushed out a YouTube thing to you guys. They've done a lot of PR. Yeah, they're a great applicant.
That's great. Yeah, it's a success story.
Yeah, beautiful landscape too. Just beautiful corridor. They do a really good job.
Also say it's nice to see more projects coming this year. It felt like maybe last year they we're a little underrepresented. This year, it seems like there's quite a few quality projects that came out of the region.
Yeah. So, yes, Mark, I think they're somewhat, I mean, helicopters similar, the Norfolk Eagle was a lot lower down, kind of main stage of our elevation. This Tuck Creek is definitely had water in the system. So I think it's similar to the large wood helicopter placement, but the like the different water where it's happening. It's pretty low and the back looks like this is up. You know, towards like that counts for way up behind there.
That was, if not the highest, one of the highest that I reviewed was that Tuck Creek. And it seems like that's a great project. And the adjacency to all that spawning habitat. Seems like it is a great fit.
Yeah, and we talked a bit about the phases. I know phase 1 and 2 were really successful projects.
So that speaks to the applicant's capacity, the question of capacity. They've demonstrated the ability to execute.
Yeah, high level success there. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions for Paul? Thanks, Paul. That was great. And last but not least, Region 5 with Kirsten and Jeremy.
It's first next year.
Yeah, so Kirsten Russell,
Jeremy Webster.
and so I cover the northern half, Jeremy covers the southern half. And we kind of split the proposals that come into our region based on the areas that we're most familiar with, based on our normal kind of realms. And so we're going to co-present and we'll just jump back and forth depending on which project was which. So it's going to do it for me now.
Give me a minute. I think I'm good.
Wait, hold on. Maybe it doesn't like
Try
everything.
it again. No, that was me. Now you
That's
can.
me, okay,
Yes.
all right.
I have to like give it, it's probably first and then it goes.
Yeah, it, like all of our computers today, just needs some warm up time. Okay, so this is our region. As you can tell, it's a majority of the state. And like the other maps you've seen like this, like Paul explained, the size of the circle represents the amount of funding requested. The numbers correspond to the other information that's on the side. And I believe those match up with the numbers that Andy was using for the project numbers as well. But anyways, I know that we wanted to get some more projects from the east side as well as from the Willamette, and we had about 36% of the amount of funding requested overall this year came from the east side, just over 12 million. The average ask was 577,000 or so. We had 21 proposals submitted from Eastern Oregon. 9 of them were implementation. 2 were planning, 1 was the research and monitoring, and 9 of them covered more than one of those categories. We had 5 that ODFW ranked as critical, 9 as high, 2 medium, 4 low, and 1 that wasn't quite ready for funding. And we had 12 out of the 18 counties in Eastern Oregon represented in those applicants.
Kristen, how many last year?
Honestly, I think there were 22 last year. So same number, but the overall, I think the overall ask was more, and last year I believe there were 74 applicants statewide, and this year there were like 63. So the portion is slightly larger with pretty much the same number of applicants.
Kristen and Jeremy, on this process, did it work well to have you just picking project by project? You're just going to be running point on that, or would it be helpful to have that region split north and south?
So it's pretty much split for our PFA, our actual stewardship areas.
Right.
So it is split. It doesn't show it on the map.
Yeah, we have a different map that shows for like our normal thing. So I don't recall why for the grant cycle, they chose a different boundary, just combining it all. Maybe that's something you guys could revisit if you wanted to.
Would it be helpful, or is this working fine and there's really no need to?
I mean, it's worked fine. We split it, although the outside reviewers, so NOAA, USFS, and ODF review it for all 21 projects. So it could be helpful for their standpoint, if there was enough where we could find different people for the two areas. I don't know one of the representative, but I know the other two are from my region that reviewed the ones that were in Jeremy's area as well. So it could definitely be helpful from their standpoint in terms of workload. If we could find other reviewers that would be able to help with that feature. So.
Maybe can you take note of that for a future discussion at one of our committee meetings? It just came in.
That's not an
Okay. Just.
There were 6 regions.
getting additional, yeah.
No, definitely talk about it.
Awesome, thank you.
And so, just in general, like the things that are important in our region, got a pretty bull trout up there. Bull trout are good. But for the HCP species that we have in our region, we don't have quite the laundry list that the coast side does. We have bull trout, giant salamander, just in a small section of Jeremy's area, mountain whitefish, and then the native salmonids. And as I was mentioning earlier to one of Andrew's questions, generally regions in our area are mostly funded from other sources due to, like if they are Chinook streams, those are the ones that end up receiving priority funding. So that's where this PFA grant fits in really nicely to help kind of round out and be able to provide funding for streams that may not be able to get up there higher on the priority list for some other funding sources. Especially for steelhead and bull trout streams and red band trout. Thank you. Some common issues that I know are pretty common across the state, but just to kind of re-emphasize degraded habitat, especially due to agriculture and ranching. Fish entrainment within irrigation networks. There's a lot of, due to the agriculture and stuff, there's a lot of irrigation networks. And so if fish screens are put in, there could be fish that get in there and get stranded. High water temperatures are a huge issue. Plenty of streams reach lethal temperatures in the summer if they're not already dewatered during travel times. Juvenile salmonid summer survival is always a challenge. And like Paul was mentioning, they have to get through a lot of dams and a lot of things in order to get to our region. So, and just being able to make it back and just with the dryness in the summer, especially, that can cause some challenges, which I mentioned right after the dry intermittent streams. Very common, both fish bearing and non-fish bearing. In general, just declining anadromous populations as well as non-native competition, especially for bull trout. There's a lot of talk about brook trout, which are invasive. They're kind of one of the primary limiting factors for bull trout, being able to kind of persevere, recover in some areas. And brook trout tend to do better in warmer environments compared to bull trout. They're still both very cold water fish, but bull trout require even colder water and are usually even higher up in the watershed. So just paying attention to that when designing restoration projects and things. And then just all the catastrophic wildfires that wreak havoc everywhere. We had some very large ones burn in our area this past year. So just keeping that in mind as well. So this next one's my project, kind of jumping in here. So, and the way that we organize this is just alphabetically within critical first alphabetically and then high alphabetically. So we'll just kind of jump back and forth And all the photos that we're gonna be using are ones that were submitted within the applications. So we did show something that seems representative to share with you guys. So, for the East Fork Irrigation District Screen Upgrade and Habitat Enhancement Design, this is from the Hood River Watershed Group. It is a planning project. They also mentioned community engagement. However, I don't believe that that is the way that you guys were anticipating that project type being used. They're talking about like engaging the community and understanding things about the project and reaching out, whereas I think that the PFA version of that is to reach out about the grant program. So just kind of a note there. The cost for this one is $419,500. The species that are there, they're HCP. We have Chinook, coho, cutthroat, rainbow, and steelhead. And so quite a few for ours that kind of runs the gamut for this one. In terms of the federally protected or endangered species, there's the Lower Columbia spring Chinook, Lower Columbia coho, Lower Columbia winter steelhead are the specific subgroups. In general, this project is developing an engineered design to move a fish screen 0.43 miles closer to the head gate and enhance habitat within that bypass, and not just doing the screen, but also enhancing the habitat there. Some of the benefits for this project are that there are very many HCP species that it's impacting, which is not so easy to do in our region. It would likely save thousands of ESA listed fish annually, because currently ODFW and others have to salvage hundreds, if not thousands, of fish every year from the bypass due to the fact that they're getting in there without that screen. And they're pretty much all listed species that they're getting out of there. And then another benefit is that it includes that habitat enhancement and would likely keep more water in the stream, and anywhere that we can add more water in the stream is a huge benefit to the fish that require water to live in the stream. So, and I just like seeing that there was, it wasn't just like a fish screening, it was like, oh, we're gonna do something in addition to kind of help the in-stream component. So the concern that we noted was just limited mention of coordination with ODFW, which would be required to make sure everything passes state regulation for all of that. And so it might have just been an oversight in terms of it being documented, but that was just something that we wanted to note, make sure that gets looked at if this project moves forward, either with PFA money or elsewise. And so we gave it critical.
Thousands of fish annually, hundreds of thousands, right?
Yes.
If
Yeah.
I remember correctly, the application listed that there are no fish currently bypassing the fish screen, even though it doesn't meet the NOAA standards. The application said that there were no fish that were bypassing the screen.
That is definitely interesting. I don't recall that specifically, and my computer does not want to open PDFs right now, but I do remember this one specifically. I reached out to our fish screen office as well as our district bios in those regions. And they both came back and let me know, because they are actively involved in the salvage efforts every year. And so that was from firsthand knowledge from them, not from me. So that's what I'm sharing here. I can't recall what the wordage was in the actual application.
Oh, something similar, like it didn't meet NOAA standards, but it was technically functioning.
Yeah.
Because they weren't running much beyond it.
I know that certainly influenced the way that I ranked the project. If
Yeah.
it stated that there was currently no fish bypassing the screen, that's a very different priority than thousands of fish dying annually.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing I know just in general is even if there are fish screens, oftentimes there are fish that get through them, even if they are up to standards, just in general, that tends to be how it works. But yeah, it would be good. I'm glad Andy will be able to pull that up so we can verify the language that was used.
And could you clarify, because that caught my eye too, like we could say thousands, like how could we sit here and say no when you have thousands of floods on the slide? But it sounded like they're being rescued currently by hand. If somebody has to go in there and collect them and move them around. So is that
Yes.
happening? Okay, so they're not parachuting right now,
Not necessarily. It takes time and effort,
of course.
money obviously to do it each year. There is gonna be some
Right.
mortality just from moving the fish, rather than letting them do what they're
Now,
supposed to, but there is currently effort to try to keep that from happening.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. The salvage isn't perfect. I know I've done.
Yeah.
a lot of it.
But that is a good point.
Okay, I was just like kind of panicking.
No, I apologize for misleading in that way.
And to be clear, this is a planning project, right? So this isn't actually,
Yes, this would be designing, what the structure would be, and whatever type of in-stream work that would be done. But you're correct, it's not asking for implementation funds at this point.
How old is the existing structure?
I'm not sure if I have that. I know that like it didn't meet NOAA standards.
It's definitely been there a little while.
Yeah. This one, we didn't open up, so maybe that's another one that Andy could check, potentially.
any other questions on this one while Andy's looking? Well, when he's able to find out, we can come back to it.
Yeah.
So the next project that also received a critical priority is fish passage and screening in the upper Chico watershed. This is phase 2. I'm not really sure where they're referring to phase 1 or what's been completed on that aspect, but regardless, this is phase 2. It's put out by the Crook County Soil and Water Conservation District. Cost about $200,000. It's a 3-year project seeking to uplift red band trout, which is pretty typical for my region. Most of the projects are looking to uplift red band. This project in particular is going to take fish passage designs from 60% to completion. From what I understand, they had an OWEB technical assistance grant. They got them there. They just need, kind of a final push to get it to completion. The plan is to improve passage at 2 sites. So that's going to involve modifying the structures to provide fish passage. So in that photo there, that is one of the structures from one of the sites for this particular project. You can see, obviously, this is summertime and no passage is going to be happening then anyways. But it can be a difficult passage barrier for fish, even when there is actually water. So 2 sites that more or less look like that is how I understand it. They're also going to add screens, I think, no, pardon me, 1 screen at one of the sites to prevent entrainment. That particular screen or that particular ditch is unscreened currently. And they're also going to add a head gate at that same unscreened diversion. So the benefits, pretty obvious. If you can screen these irrigation canals, you can prevent fish from going in them, dying, especially in this region where high summer water temps are very, very common. The other nice thing about this project, it is part of a holistic approach to the entire Upper Ochoco watershed. This Crook County Water Conservation District has been doing a lot of work on barriers and trying to get passage throughout the entire basin is their ultimate plan. One thing to know, this particular project is all on private property. A lot of the land in the entire basin that they're planning on doing work on as part of, I guess, other phases. Most of that's private land. So one of the benefits potentially is that, you can show success with helping with conservation of red band trout while also, providing water to places where the landowners want it. Hopefully, if they see success on their neighbor's land, maybe they'll be willing to take it up in subsequent years.
Those are the big benefits. One concern is just, as you see in that picture, there are very low flows in summer. They can be a pretty limiting factor for all species up there, but especially red band. So there could be limited success as a result, but overall, I found this to be a very good project, pretty good bang for your buck. It's relatively cheap. And should, do some good work on these private lands in the watershed. Questions?
Speak a little bit more to the landowner. So this particular project planning and implementation is geographically defined. Like the location is where it's going to be. So they know the private landowner, right? So the landowner knows about. I know I keep asking this. We didn't require they were to check a box or anything, but did you get a sense that the landowner is involved as part of the team?
I got a sense from the application itself. I also got a sense at a landowner meeting that had nothing to do with this that happened subsequently.
Jeremy, do you know if there are any other complementary proposals in terms of BDAs to maybe get raised water table, riparian fencing, piping some of the ditches just to improve? Because it is really dry and anything you can do to conserve and save might lend to our confidence that this would be money well spent.
Yeah, I don't believe there were, I know there's, I've answered this for another project where they are doing upland work in conjunction with it. As far as I can recall, and I'm just kind of glancing through this right now, there aren't, well, I'm not aware of them if they are there. A lot of this, like I said, is private land. I don't know the makeup exactly, but there's a fair amount of timber out there. I can tell you one of the sites where it's at, because I've actually been out there before for other things. And that particular landowner is a good steward for the most part that I've seen. They also allow us to do trainings on their land on occasion for other things, but try not to let that influence me on the ranking of this particular project.
Yeah, it's certainly not a deal killer at all. I'm just,
Yeah.
It lends to the degree of optimism of success.
Yeah. And that one of those particular landowners certainly does. Mostly getting to know Crook County and how they work gives me more confidence.
Okay.
Getting this work done, and they've already done pathway work within that watershed in other areas on private land. So,
Jeremy, can you tell me a little bit about Ochoco Creek itself, the gradient? If that's a high gradient stream, there could be benefit from BDAs to help lower that velocity and let the sediment infill some of that.
so these areas in particular where that picture is taking is pretty low gradient. The one side I'm thinking of that I've actually been to is pretty much where it's starting to become low gradient. So this is, I don't know if you know that area well, this is upstream of Ochoco Reservoir, not too far from Bryanville, or not too far from the reservoir itself, actually. What's your question?
Just the gradient of the streams.
Yeah.
Would they really benefit from BDAs, or are they already relatively low velocity? It wouldn't slow it down enough to have that sediment fill in.
No, it's all pretty low, low gradient there. Yes.
I'll throw out too, when we're thinking about BDAs, we're also trying to place them in habitats that beavers would historically have occupied. And that's gonna be like 1 to 2%.
In this,
So we're not trying to slow high gradient down usually.
in this case, I know there are beaver present within that area already.
Right. This is beaver country. I'm familiar with the area.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, we actually, speaking of training, we did a beaver sign training right in that area in the past, so.
To your point, AJ, I've seen beaver activity in some of those higher gradient streams that are dry in the summer, but when they are wet, if there's good food and a lot of willow, you will see them come and forage for that. So if there were, not every beaver is a damming beaver. Yep. So it's just being thoughtful about where we're adding the BDAs. Are they really going to accomplish anything? Or is the stream, not really set up? Thank you.
Do we want to answer the questions from?
Yeah.
And while you're pulling that up, I did go back and look at the reviewer that I asked for additional information on, and just to clarify, based on what they had said, that each year several hundred that salmonids and lamprey, including ESA listed Chinook, steelhead, and coho salmon, need to be salvaged from the diversion at the end of the irrigation season. So designing a better bypass will save those fish throughout the year and eliminate that need for extensive salvage, and so that adds up year to year. And just in general, that the the irrigation district has already voluntarily taken action to lessen the impact of their diversions. So that shows the commitment by the landowner to go towards conservation while still achieving their irrigation needs. I thought that was another good point to bring up, but I think Andy had some more specifics as well.
The question, and just to be clear, was it explicitly stated there's fish mortality?
No, but they stated there is not an issue with fish passing through the screen. Fish screen is currently functioning.
Yes, that is what they are implying in their application, that it is functioning. It just is not meeting the standards that we discussed. Have you guys ever had a discussion that's been out for other discussion? Yes, application.
So we're not talking about hundreds or thousands being rescued from past the fish screen. This is from within the diversion prior to the fish screen. Is that right? Got the,
I guess
you got
that
the head
would,
gate, and then
yeah.
you've got that column of water, and then you've got a fish screen, and then it goes back to the stream. Correct?
that sounds like probably the way that's.
So this is moving the screen closer to the head gate where the water comes into the system.
That is my understanding.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so it's like 0.4 miles into like where they can go 0.4 miles in the wrong direction, essentially.
I think the ODFW commission actually held their tour at this site
Okay.
in the spring.
Yeah, and I'm looking at their best statement here, and they say that it will eliminate the 1/2 mile bypass. That is part of the goal.
So that's helpful. So that the fish are getting trapped in the diversion, but they're not getting past the fish screen and into the closed canals. They used to be open canals and other pipes. Fish aren't getting in the pipes, but they need to be saved from a portion that's not the stream prior to the fish screen.
Thanks.
Which is why they're moving.
Closer to the end state.
Yeah.
That's all great.
Okay.
Yeah, this is one where I could have used a slightly more detailed map to help my brain wrap around what all was going on, but this was.
Oh, and there's an awesome, this is also an example of a really good project that maybe wasn't clearly communicated in the application itself. And so as we talk through it, we see, well, there's a clear need here that maybe wasn't expressed as well in the application. So I know that certainly impacted how I rated this project, because I ranked it based on there is no current problem with fish.
Yeah.
I'd like to would have ranked higher had I known that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of fish that need to be salvaged annually from the current. So
Yeah, and I didn't know that. It was just from me pinging those people that I knew the area and was like, hey, what additional information?
it's great work that you did that. Otherwise, we would still be in this room thinking there's no problem.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it was good information to get.
Yeah, I had a similar situation as to Chad, but that was the only real overview map. There weren't any site photos to show the diversion channel.
Yeah, this was the only picture I could choose for this.
So it's really tough to envision.
So good feedback for the applicant. All right. Next one is the Little Creek Buffalo Flats Restoration Project. This is one from the Union Soil and Water Conservation District. This one is an implementation ask. Cost is $294,000. The HCP species were bull trout, Chinook, red band and steelhead. And so the federally protected or endangered species include those, so bull trout, Snake River, spring and summer Chinook, and Snake River steelhead. In general, this project is part of a larger 1.25 mile, 268 acre restoration project, but the part that they're specifically asking money from the PFA is to install a fish screen and some habitat structures. So I wanted to point that out because this is a larger project, but the part that I was specifically focusing on is the part being asked for the PFA money. One of the benefits of this project is it is supporting working lands, which I know is something that the PFA really values in terms of not, shutting down timberlands or things like that. This one isn't timber, it's, grazing and agriculture and that kind of thing. I think primarily grazing, but, so supporting that. And then, the landowner seems, they're very conservation minded. And they're working on pursuing a permanent conservation easement as part of this kind of overall effort. And so that is for, I want to say about 11, I'd have to look up. I could get the numbers on exactly how many acreage the conservation easement would be for. But the main concern is again, one that I know of just from being in the area, and I've been hearing about this project, is that there is some concern from the community for the in-stream portion of the work. Again, that's not what is being requested for funding for PFA. And as far as I know, I've not heard any concern in terms of putting in a fish screen or the wood and stuff that would be being asked for from the PFA. Mostly has to do with some of the other water work and some just community disgruntlement. But I do know that this applicant has been very forthright and has done a lot of outreach to try to get the community to understand what's going on. And there could be some miscommunication, I think, is what some of that underlying aspect is of those concerns.
When you say in-stream work, do you mean in the stream or do you mean in-stream water?
In-stream, like in the, like what they're actually doing. Like, so this essentially will be stage 0 reset for a large portion of it. And so that's where there's some flooding concerns that the community has, even though it's a no-rise project. And so those concerns from an engineering standpoint are not 100% valid or scientifically backed. But there still is, that is still something the community is concerned about. But again, that doesn't have to do with the PFA part, so.
Is that copy image a photograph or a rendering of what the?
No, that is a demonstration of what the final version was looks like.
It's a sky and the hills look like a photo, but you get down and it just doesn't.
Yeah, no, this is kind of the one that they have on their front, like all of their applications that I've seen both from here and then within the watershed meetings I attend, so.
It's a significantly altered tributary.
Yeah, Little Creek is like a big cold water tributary, and Catherine Creek is very important for Chinook and stuff. It's, there's a lot of importance there, but it is a heavily degraded stream. And so right now they've kind of portioned out the project to just focus on Little Creek to try to tackle some of that community concern and just start with one thing and then kind of work out. So it was originally going to be both Little Creek and Catherine Creek for the whole scale. And right now they're just going to be like, all right, we'll start with Little Creek and go from there. But Little Creek is a really good cold water tributary that comes into Catherine Creek. Yeah. Any other questions for this one? So the next one is the North Fork Walla Walla River Holistic Floodplain Restoration for river miles 5.2 to 6.5. So this is the Walla Walla Basin Watershed Council. You guys saw a presentation on this one a few months ago for the project that we funded from them last year. And that was one of the ones you guys are debating about going for field trip this year. But ended up deciding on, staying in the southwest region. And so this is the same applicant, same river stretch, it's just the next chunk. So this is phase 3 of 5, and phase 2 as well as completed with the PFA money last year. And they were, I think, the first, if not one of the first to finish out, and do that was our first site tour, with post implementation. So, this one's again, implementation, they're asking for 432,000. The species involved are bull trout, chinook, mountain whitefish, redband, and steelhead. And those are Middle Columbia steelhead. The on-the-ground project would be 1.3 miles and 59 acres of restoration. Primarily a lot of levees from different mining efforts in the past, and mostly there's some big flooding that went through, and so they did a lot of levees and things like that to just kind of respond quickly and protect some infrastructure, primarily the road. But the benefits would be creating additional spawning and rearing habitat. This is a priority basin to quite a few agencies. And the applicant has demonstrated their ability to successfully implement the project. The project we went and saw from last year's funding looked really great. And they showed us, we went upstream to the stretch and they showed us this is the stretch we're putting in for this year. And honestly, I couldn't find any major concerns to flag within the application. It seemed really well written, and that, yeah, there wasn't anything that jumped out at me or any of the other reviewers that I pinged for this one.
Just a quick question for Andy. Is this our only one or anybody else that builds on a previously funded proposal, like it's incrementally the next phase, or do we have some others that?
Previously PFA.
Yeah, PFA.
Yeah.
The only one that did obviously jumped. Yeah.
Because
One, got number 1.
yeah, this one was one of the higher ranked ones from the committee, but I think this was the the only one that's like consecutively built, like on that river mile as the next phase. There was one more, and I'm sorry, the name's escaping me, where they did try to build up one. Oh, no, the River Raw Group, they did a different project last year too, in a similar area, so they reapplied. That was one we were just talking about, they were moving with the screen. And they actually completed their project, but I think only like those two, I don't remember another one.
Well, and I really liked it, but he did make that question for me, like, do we want to sort of incrementally build upon previous funded projects? Or do we want to spread the love and say, okay, we did North Park well, let's go somewhere else.
I think
My
it depends,
inclination
right?
is to build.
I mean, that question is relevant partly in that I did, in some of these applications I read, in the later phases, they projected future need. They actually identified plans to request for PFA funding in future phases, which I didn't mark down.
No, I think it just depends. Maybe, but there might be a higher ranked, more priority project. Just depends on the batch of applications that next go around, I think. For me,
I mean, it was a really good proposal, so in and of itself, it stood on its own, but I definitely said, oh, this is great, it builds on it, but then on the other side of it was like, well, do we want to do that? We want to like say, great, we did a little bit in the North Fork, let's go somewhere else.
I feel like it's probably best to just look at the
Look at
project,
it.
independent of whether it was funded in the
Yeah.
past or not, and compare it against the other slate of projects that year.
Yeah.
And not give them priority over other good projects just because we funded it last time, but that we shouldn't be penalizing them just because we funded it. It should be looked at independent and compared to the other projects of the year.
Realizing I'm elevating these existential questions.
it's interesting. though.
It's good to have a discussion.
Yeah.
You know, do we, add a box, have you received funding in the past, and does that mean that you are more likely or less likely? I think the answer is no, that we just look at them all independent of funding in the past. And say, this year is this project worth funding versus the other projects.
It's certainly a strength of a proposal and saying, look, there's been work done, we're building on that work, whether or not we funded it.
And what it does do is it speaks to applicant capacity and the ability to execute.
Yeah.
If we as a committee know that in a year prior that demonstrated that capacity. That certainly helps them. But I would say that's probably the only metric that past funding would.
And that was the case for this one for me as well. Some of the concerns I had last year due to the timeline or only having a 30% design at the time the application was given versus a 60 or 90 when asking for implementation. I'm like, well, they had a great product last time. They were able to meet all of the timelines that they said that they were going to meet. And so I didn't feel the need to raise that concern this time because they proved on the same stretch that was appropriate.
So if we fund a planning phase of a 3-phase project, it doesn't obligate us to then continue to fund the next phases, but it could speak to capacity to execute.
Sure, yeah.
And just a disclosure for me on this one, my consulting firm, my business partner, Amanda Cronin, is the coordinator of the Walla Walla 2050 initiative, which these guys are actively on. So this is one of the types of activities that consider under Walla Walla 2050, but we're not benefiting from it. Certainly aware of the work that's going on. Has done.
Thank you for disclosing.
Yeah.
Anything else for this one? This next one kind of raises a similar question. This is one that was submitted to us last year for review. It did not go above the funding line, so it was not funded, but then they revised their application based on, they had some feedback post-application, they revised it, felt like they addressed a lot of the concerns or suggestions that we put, and then they resubmitted it again this year. And so this is phase 1 for Camp Creek Wet Meadow and Aquatic Resiliency Project. Applicant was Trout Unlimited. This is a implementation and research and monitoring project. Again, they mentioned community engagement, but I'm not sure that quite fit in with where PFA thought it was. It's more talking about outreach to community and involvement with community members. Cost is $803,000. HCP species include bull trout, chinook, mountain whitefish, red band, and steelhead. That's Middle Columbia bull trout, Snake River spring and summer chinook, and Snake River steelhead. So in general, this project enhances 2.8 miles of stream and 30 acres of wetland. And this is part of a larger 4.7 mile reach, restoring a wet meadow system, which is a pretty unique system. Benefits is I felt like it aligned really well with many of the PFA priorities. The land is owned by the Nature Conservancy, and so that helps ensure that the project will enhancement will persist long term. It's not going to be changing hands or be degraded. Like this is something that I feel like we can have confidence that the benefits done through the implementation will then persist. And the project is shovel ready for 2025. They're done with the planning, or it's at least at 90% and ready for implementation. They've already done a lot of the permitting and all of that. That's all wrapping up. If it hasn't already been wrapped up. The only concern is that many of the fish benefits seem to be a bit overstated in the application. Project is likely only to benefit red band and steelhead. The other species listed are a bit further downstream, and so there would be some beneficial habitat just from as you restore things upstream, water flows down. You're going to have some benefits, but not quite as direct or easily realized. But we still thought that it would be a good project to fund with PFA money, and we gave it a critical ranking. So, any questions on this one?
I felt like I had a question around the relationship with phase 2. Like phase 2 was critical to the outcomes that were articulated in phase 1.
You're asking if only one was done, if the other one would be worthwhile? Is that?
Well, like this, this was kind of just outside of my subject matter to the standpoint that I understand what was claiming this would do in phase one is actually possible without phase two.
Yeah, so the way that this one is broken up, because people can divide their projects in different ways. I believe the planning is done for the entire stretch, but due to the large cost asked to do the entire thing in one go, that's why they're splitting it up. And I believe most of it, I believe the way this one is split up is like phase one is like one section where they're doing everything. Phase two is, I think, the downstream section. Different projects will do things differently. Sometimes they'll do like touch on different things throughout the entire overall project reach. And then, like I said, this one is more like, we're gonna do everything in this section and then we're gonna move and do everything in this section. But because the total ask, because this one is gonna be a bit heavy-handed in terms of digging and filling channel and things like that. And so the cost is higher than some of the low-tech work. And so that's why they decided to split up the ask to potentially help with getting funding awarded by not asking for such a big chunk of money.
And I think the question, Courtney, that you're trying to get at is, are what they're saying their outcome is going to be just associated with the completion of phase one,
Gotcha.
independent of the phase two happens. So these
Right.
what they would get out of it.
Yeah, I believe that this one, the application was kind of referring mostly to the overall project. That was something that I kind of wrestled with for quite a few applications. There were some applications that did a better job at stating that this is the part that PFA is asking of, these are the specific benefits, and then others where it's like, let me tell you about the whole project. And so I believe most of the narrative was regarding the overall project. But again, because the way that this one is split up, and because it's not just like, you know, just moving large wood, just doing a portion of it, I think there would still be some aspect that is still realized.
Even if phase two doesn't come to.
Yeah, obviously it'll be less. I think phase two is gonna get at the part that had more infrastructure situations, if I recall correctly, where like the Nature Conservancy has like a few, there's like a crossing, and then there's a couple buildings, and I believe that that's gonna be on the second phase, but I could be wrong. That's where that breakout is. Yeah.
I hesitate to say that the land ownership is the benefit compared to any other landowner that may be interested in any of these conservation type projects. I recognize that, you know, it's called out, but I'm not sure that that should be viewed as a benefit over any other landowner type.
Yeah.
For example, the Little Creek one, that landowner from the application seemed just as invested in the long-term outcomes. To call it out in one